Really, this is a really special day for us. This National Parks at Night started out as a bit of an idea, a dream, one would say. I think we all have these sort of bucket lists to go to these wonderful places in the world, right? And the national parks are definitely one of those places. And to say that you've been to been to multiple of them, how many people here have like the passport book for national parks at night, right? Or national parks, sorry. It's great, and I really enjoy, getting into that park, getting that stamp, right? It's getting that badge of honor. So Matt and I, about a year ago, we teach workshops anyways at historic New York locations, and we discussed our love for national parks and our travel ventures, and we brought up this idea and how could we make it work and bring it to fruition. And I think it's even less than a year that we had this idea, and we reached out to 3 of our good friends, and also, as Deb said, and I can vouch for them, it's 3 really premier experts on night photography as well as national parks. And it's really, to see this come together and to see a packed house here at the B&H event space, and a bunch of people signed up for the walk tonight is really, thank you, guys, thank you. This is a great thing to see, and I really hope that you come on an adventure with us, whether it's here at the event space or one of our workshops. A little bit about the programs today. Each of us is going to speak for about 20 to 30 minutes about a specific topic, okay? After the first 3 speakers, so after Lance, who's the 3rd speaker, we're going to take about a 10-minute break so we can stretch our legs. Then we're going to have the final 2 speakers, okay? And then there'll be another break after those final 2 speakers. And then about the last either half an hour to 45 minutes, however it may be, we'll leave open to a panel, okay? And it's open questions for you guys to field. Again, as Deborah said, please keep your questions. Don't interrupt the speakers because we are on a bit of a time crunch here. We will take 2 questions at the end of each lecture, okay? And we need to repeat the questions so the audience out there can hear it as well, just a reminder. And then if you have any other questions or questions that you feel are open to more than just, the person speaking, then save those for the panel, please. We really want to keep this a very engaging and learning experience for you. Okay?
Those 2 questions will go to the highest bidders, right?
Exactly. The first 2 hands that each one of us sees, and each one of us has different vision, right? So with that being said, my topic on today is how to grow 6 arms. Or how to master the night with gear. Obviously, really more important than the gear is the vision, okay? But we do need the proper tools to build that vision. So my focus on my discussion is going to be on the right gear, or gear that can help you, that help inspire you and help you see better in the dark. So first off is the camera. The crux of it all is the camera. And I will tell you basically that any camera, I've been shooting night photography since the film days, okay? And back in the film days, we all used to write down copious amounts of notes. Oftentimes, if you were shooting 35 millimeter, it would take you 2 or 3 shoots to finish off a roll of film. So you're writing down all these notes, waiting maybe up to a month later to develop the film, and then seeing where you made your mistakes, and if you got any shots at all, and then can you even go back to that location. It was difficult, and there was only a very small group of people that were really successfully shooting night photography on film. The digital age has really opened the doors to that. Milky Way shots were really impossible with film, okay? The film speed wasn't high enough to really successfully capture. That's why you see some of the most popular images on Flickr and Instagram and all these other social sites are Milky Way shots, because technically those are new shots, right? There's not as many of those shots in night photography, though there's quickly catching up because it's now the most popular type of night photography is the Milky Way. But that wasn't possible until about really the digital technology came into its own about 5 to 6 years ago. So if you have a DSLR, I really recommend, especially doing the kind of long exposures that we do, really having a DSLR. So if you have a DSLR from the last 2 to 3 years, you're good to go. Okay. What you gain with that, and what you gain sort of with every new model, is better ISOs. That's usually one of the things that each camera manufacturer is raising the bar on how high you can shoot. We all kind of remember the first DSLRs. You could barely get up to 1600 ISO. You know, that was really, really noisy. And now 6400 is easily attainable. Okay. Every DSLR has manual and bulb setting, and that's really where we live in that sort of landscape, long exposure night photography, is both of those settings. A lot of point and shoot cameras really are limited to 2 to 3 minute exposures, and then that's it. They don't have a bulb setting, okay? Every DSLR can shoot in RAW, and that's really where we want to be. We want to have those larger files so that we have more information that we can play with later at home on the computer. Each one of the DSLRs also takes a shutter release. So every camera goes up to 30 seconds. You can put your camera, put on self-timer, hit click, and you can get up to 30 seconds. But then the next setting is bulb. And bulb can be anything. But you'd either have to keep your finger on the button, or you need to use a cable release that you can lock down, safely lock down, and then you can expose for hours. Okay? And every DSLR has that capability to attach a cable release to it. Optical viewfinders. Now, I've shot both mirrorless and DSLRs, and mirrorless cameras are also quite successful at night photography, but there are some drawbacks with it. One of them is that most mirrorless cameras have an electronic viewfinder, which you can't see as well as an optical viewfinder. Okay. The other kind of drawback on mirrorless with them is a lot of the lenses, and especially on the Sony side of things, there's no infinity marking. Okay. So if you're a Sony shooter, I'm not saying you can't use that camera, but you'll probably have to either use or adapt maybe a manual focus Zeiss or an old Nikon lens onto it, so that you can sort of have an infinity point onto it. And we'll get more into those details in a little bit. So a cool camera that came out and is more for astro photography than the kind of night photography that all of us shoot, and really the difference between astro and what we're branding as the general night photography. Astrophotography means you're attaching your camera to a telescope and looking at, you're looking at the nebula. You're looking really at specific, things in the sky, really, really, really very, very specific stars, and you're getting into those. So those are the type of night photography that all of us like to take, is when we incorporate the landscape into it, okay? And we do lots of low light, that sort of style, but we really include and playing, especially the colors, because oftentimes they're the warm colors of the earth against the cooler colors of the sky play so nicely together. But everyone sort of has a different sort of landscape or topography that they like to play against the night sky. And that's where I think you can actually say something more with your night photography as well. However, the Nikon D810A, that is one of the only cameras out on the market that can do this, and why they can do the astrophotography. It's probably one of the best ones. It's a full frame camera dedicated to astrophotography. It's got a very, very specific white balance setting and a cut IR filter on it that you're basically able to get the red tones of the H alpha emission. So you can really, especially you can see in this picture, it really picks up those red gases out in the nebula and out in the stars. It also is the only camera, like I said, every DSLR camera can go up to 30 seconds and then you're in bulb. This camera, you can actually, in the camera, set it up to 15 minutes. And then you go to bulb. So that's a pretty cool feature as well. It also has built-in time-lapse, interval shooting, and unlimited continuous shooting. So, if you like the stuff that we are shooting, I'm not saying you have to go get this, but if you have interest and you have a telescope and want to kind of adapt that and really look at things far away, this is probably your best option out there. Otherwise, again, like I said, any camera from the last 2 to 3 years, you're good to go. Now, I did a high ISO test on on the Nikon D4 and the Nikon D810. These are two current cameras from Nikon. And this is a test that I advise that we all do at home. And because the better we understand our camera and how it operates, especially during the day, when the lights go out, it's going to make it easier for us to know where the buttons are and figure out what the parameters of your camera is. And each one of us, you know, I might like say we both have the D810. I might like it, and I feel it's good up to 6400. But you might say, you know what, I only like it up to 3200. Everyone has their own, you know, sort of parameters that they set, you know. So I advise you do this test and know your camera. So I did this, and this is an easy test to do at home. I advise that you shoot an area like a desk, or this is my living room and a coffee table, anything that casts shadow. We're gonna see noise appear in shadow areas first. So don't just shoot your blank wall, okay? Shoot an area where there is shadow underneath. So shoot a tabletop so that you can also include the underneath of the table. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the D810 and the D4S at 6400. Both these cameras, and one of them is like 24 megapixels, and the other one is 36 megapixels. You know, they both do very well at 6400. So at least to my standards. Okay, so I would feel comfortable up to this for both those cameras. Now, if we look at the next stop up, which is 12,800, I'm seeing a little bit of grain, a little bit of breakdown, not necessarily a lot of noise. If we look at the 810, and these are basically one-to-one crops of the image. Okay, and I advise you do these shots, then zoom in one-to-one on your computer and really investigate and look in the shadow areas. The D4S, which is it's a lower megapixel and is a better geared low light camera, does, at least to my standards, fine at 12,800. So I would even feel comfortable at shooting that camera. Now, the D810 caps out sort of at 12,800, and then it has a high 0.3, high 0.7, high 0.1 setting. And there's also low settings you'll find on most cameras. I generally do not use those settings. I try to stay within the ISO real numbers, okay? When we use these highs and lows, they're doing more interpolating in the ISOs. So I'd rather you're gonna have a cleaner ISO if you stay to the true numbers. So the next test I show side by side of the D4S at 12,800 and the next stop up at 25,600. And 25,600, and we can look at it, it's not that much better. You know, it's got a little bit more grain in it, but I will say something is in this digital age that we live in, it's a pretty squeaky clean age. Everyone is always striving for the cleanest, purest images, and we can do that digitally. But I remember in the film days when I used to love shooting Tri-X400 and uprating it, you know, to like 1600 or 3200 and getting that grainy look to it. And night photography, definitely, you know, there are some gritty, grainy scenes out there. And we should embrace the grain at some point as well. So don't always try to be cleaning up your images. Sometimes don't forget to embrace the grain and keep it true to what you're trying to portray. Now, film cameras, I'm still kind of sort of using them. I bring them out really on occasion. And they're still viable, especially, I think, if you want to create those epically long star trails. They kind of just are pushed right into that. I recommend, as far as film cameras go, a medium format. These are all three cameras that I own. That Mamiya C220, which is it's this old twin lens reflex, 12 shots on a roll. And that's great because, again, if you think about if I'm averaging an hour to an hour and a half long exposure, how many shots am I going to take in a given night? 2, right? Maybe 3, right? So it's going to still take me 3 or 4 shoots to get finished with a 12 exposure roll. Imagine that on a 35 millimeter, right? That's going to take you a few months. So I really like that camera. You get a bigger negative. You get a shorter roll, so you can get into developing it and working on it soon. And also that camera, I love that camera because there's no batteries in it. And nothing drains batteries, both for digital as well as film, as then raising up that shutter. It's like Hercules under there, or Samson under there, holding up that shutter. That drains the battery more than any amount of chimping you can do on the back of a screen. So you can go through digital batteries very quickly, as well as film too. So I choose both that Nikon F3 and that Mamiya C220. Don't use batteries. The Nikon F3 does use a battery, but it's just for the meter. And then for a $20 to $50 option is either the Holga, the plastic cameras, the Holga or the Diana. Those can be fun cameras to shoot at night, and then they don't cost that much. The two films I recommend, or there's three films actually, but the two that I really use extensively, I use the Fuji Acros. It's a 100-speed black and white film. And then I also recommend the slide film, Provia 100. For both of those films, do not suffer from reciprocity failure until about 3 minutes. This new film, which I just read about, Cine Stills, that's tungsten film that's now available, I believe only in 35mm format, but that's cool because that's playing truer to the colors of night. Reciprocity failure, a brief discussion on that is basically, all films are pliable, right? It's a silver gelatin emulsion on top of plastic, right? And they're all pliable to a certain extent, and they're all really rated, just like our cameras are rated from 100 to 6400 ISO. With film, it's really rated for the amount of exposure, and if you think of light coming in, it's burning, it's etching the image onto it. Generally, after you go beyond 1 second, you need to double, triple the time in order to compensate for going to these longer exposures. So if you were to expose a digital camera and a film camera at the same thing, your digital camera would probably say, let's say it's a 10-minute exposure digitally. That could mean up to an hour to 4 hours on film, depending upon the reciprocity failure of that film. And every film has got charts and you can look at it. But like I said, a lot of times I'll go out on a shoot and I'll have two rigs, a film and a digital. I'll get my bearings with the digital, and then I'll set a film shot to just burn. And you can get an image like this. This is up at Biderman Castle, which is about 2 hours north of here. Matt and I do overnight workshops here, and this is, as you can see, the North Star, and an hour and a half. And it's bright along the horizon line, because that's Newburgh to the left, and that's the city lights sort of eating up the sky there. After the camera, the lens. This is also an important choice to make with the lens. There's lots of lenses out there. I'm showing you a couple different focal lengths. I think a lot of us on the national parks at night, we tend to shoot wide. Again, why do we shoot wide? To include more of the sky. Okay, the more we can include the sky with some landscape, the more stars, the more of the Milky Way we can include. So some of my favorite lenses are like a 24mm, a 20mm, an 18mm. Fisheye lenses can be also very, very popular to use. Whatever lens you do bring with, don't forget to bring the lens hood, okay? Lens hoods are just as important at night as they are during the day. You can get flare from the moon, you can get flare from street lights, and lens hoods definitely help a lot with putting down, suppressing the flare. The best lenses to use, especially in low light situations, are gonna be manual focus lenses. Focusing is probably one of the most difficult things you can do at night, and if you're on the night walk tonight, we're gonna spend a lot of time helping you focus, because oftentimes, again, at national parks, there's not bright subjects, right? So we're gonna be focusing on infinity. If you have old Nikon lenses or the Zeiss brand of current lenses, all of them have hyperfocus distance settings. And this is probably the biggest and best thing for focusing at night. And we can gain a more depth, and it's easier for us to focus because we just set it on the lens. It's really hard with a lot of the autofocus lenses. The infinity point really isn't where it should be. And oftentimes what we'll do is, once we find it during the day, we'll tape down our lens so that we have that infinity point. And that's very important because we want our stars to be sharp, okay? We want the foreground to be sharp, and we want the stars to be sharp. And we can do that with wide-angle lenses, focused, oftentimes using hyperfocus, and then locked down for the rest of the night. Another important thing, and why if you want to do Milky Way shots, shooting a wide and fast lens, that's going to be your key. And shooting with a camera that can safely use ISOs of at least 3200 and definitely 6400. You'll be kind of living in those two ISOs, and we're gonna put the 500 rule. And this is going to explain to you why a wide lens is going to be very important. And this is here's your information that's worth the price of admission here. You're going to take basically the full frame focal length of your lens and divide that into 500. So one of my favorite Nikon lenses is they just released within the last year a 20 millimeter 1.8 lens. Okay, so we take 500 or divide 20 into 500, and that equals 25. 25 seconds. That is your shutter speed. That is the maximum shutter speed you can use before stars start to trail. Okay, with Milky Way shots, we really want the stars to be sharp and crisp. Okay? For example, most of us have a 50 millimeter lens. We divide 50 into 500 and we're limited to 10 seconds. We're zooming more into that night sky, so we're going to be zooming more into the movement of the stars, or the rotation of the Earth, I should say. Tripods and heads. So tripods, how do we keep it stable out there? And how do we figure out what tripod is right for you? Basically, there's two options out there. You can either choose an aluminum tripod or a carbon tripod. The main difference is weight, and you'll basically pay anywhere from $100 to $200 to save a pound on a pound. Basically, aluminum ones are range in price from 4 to 6 pounds, and carbon fiber tripods range anywhere from 2 to 4 pounds. If you're someone that can drive to most of your locations and don't like, hiking or walking for more than, a half a mile, then aluminum might be fine. I generally shoot with carbon fiber. I like the savings on the weight, and they're just better constructed, more stable, and they don't, especially in the winter time, they're not going to get as cold. Aluminum, of course, conducts the cold weather, so when you touch it, it'll be cold. So if you're going to have an aluminum one, wrap it. If you have a carbon one, you're fine to touch it. Okay, but how do you shop for one? I definitely advise going out to B&H. They have about 150 tripods. You can line up and see which one fits you. The weight and how much you can carry is important, but we also want to make sure it gets up to our eye level with a camera on it, with all legs extended. That's sort of the easiest way to kind of keep it level and balanced. So find one, like a good pair of pants or a good pair of shoes that fits you perfectly. Okay? And then how small it can go. There's been a new rage of travel tripods. You can see the Gitzo one that they do these 180 degree flip. So they save you about 2 to 3 inches in packing. So this is great. I can pack, one of my tripods fits into my suitcase, and I have an overhead suitcase. The other tripod I have is a bigger tripod, won't fit in my suitcase. So oftentimes I'll strap it to my backpack. Okay? Ball heads, I generally shoot with ball heads. They're a little bit easier to use, and they're also lighter weight. Most ball heads are going to weigh anywhere from 1/2 pound to 1.5 pounds. 3-way and 5-way heads, even though they can be wonderful precision machines, they weigh at least 2 pounds and often 3.5 pounds. So a very important consideration. I also like to have L brackets on my cameras. That way, its L bracket will have an Arca Swiss compatible mount. So instead of using the plates that we always lose on the ball heads, you'll have something that's permanently attached and custom fitting to your camera. And you can change from horizontal to vertical without losing the nodal point. You'll have the same sort of composition flipping from horizontal to vertical. So very, very important. Cable releases. So we have our camera, we got our lens, we got our tripod. I mentioned a cable release that's going to get us to play within that bulb zone. Okay? I'm a big fan of these Velo remotes, and they make 3 different types. They make your simple trigger and lock, and basically you would time it with your watch or your watch. And those are great, and those just run off the battery of the camera, so no need to worry about batteries dying and stuff like that. And that's my backup, and that usually costs under $10. The other two that I like are what Velo calls their shutter boss, and they have the wired shutter boss and the wireless shutter boss. One's $50, the wired, and the wireless is $100. And this is what you need. You need this cable release if you're going to do any sort of interval shooting. So star stacking and time lapse, if that's of interest to you, then you need to get one of those. They come fitting to whatever camera you have. So usually Nikon and Canon have there's two different models by Velo, depending upon your camera model. So you just get the one that fits yours. And that's where you can get shots like this. This is Glacier National Park. This is about, I think it's 18 5-minute shots. Okay, so I set my intervalometer to take a picture every 5 minutes, so take a 5-minute shot, and there would be a 1-second break in between, and then in Photoshop, I brought these all together, stacked them together, and it was quite easy. And this is sort of the night photography standard for creating digital long star trails. Flashes and flashlights, these are wonderful light painting tools to use. The flash will give you a big burst of light, and a flashlight will be like a paintbrush, and you can finesse light wherever you want it. And we always bring these, as well as a few other light painting tools on our adventures, and this is wonderful ways where you can kind of put your imprint onto the image, as well as open up dark shadows. With flashes and flashlights, there's always lots of sort of accessories that you can kind of, and the main ones would be like snoots and gels. A snoot is something you can put over your flash or flashlight, but like this is one of my favorite ones by Impact, and it's going to take flash. When a big burst of flash goes out, it goes out like this, right? Now you can zoom it to 200 millimeter, and maybe it goes to that. But once we put a snoot on, we can really get a tight beam and really place the light specifically where we want it. I like this Impact one because not only does it have the snoot, but it's got a grid attachment on it that you can choose to use or not use and get a really, really tight beam. Gels for flash or flashlights, those will let us either add a splash of color or match color temperatures to the night sky or to your white balance setting. Really, as far as flashes go, use whatever's in your bag or your Nikon, Canon, whatever version you might have. A benefit is if you have one of the higher end flashes, one that's got a battery pack connection. If you're going to be using it a lot, the recycle rate and by using a battery pack is going to help you get more bursts of flash out there. Flashlights, really, there's so many flashlights out there. And the considerations for purchasing a flashlight are looking really at the lumens, which is the power, how much power it's gonna, our mag lights that we all have, those are about 6 or 8 lumens, okay? There are tactical and night photography flashlights that are starting usually at 40 lumens, then they go up to 5,000 lumens, which you could probably light up Zion with. So I usually travel with 3 to 4 flashlights to have a variety of flashlights. One of our favorite ones is by Coast. It's the HPR7, I believe, and what's nice about that is it zooms, and when you zoom it, it's basically focusing the light, so you can actually put a tighter beam on it, and it doesn't have a hot spot. It keeps an even distribution of light around it. But looking at the color, I generally like warmer flashlights, the ones that are either tungsten or incandescent, but those are becoming few and far between. Most flashlights are LED, which is hopefully white, but oftentimes blue. And that's where using a gel, either a gel cap, some flashlights come with the gel caps, or using one of the gels that you can also use for your flash, and matching a color temperature to that gel, to that flashlight to warm it up or cool it down. A really cool and new tool that a lot of, that's kind of hitting, that's trending now, especially on Instagram, is the Pixel Stick. And B&H has been carrying it now for about 6 months. I just went out to Joshua Tree and we did a very informal little class with some of the B&Hers, took a little road trip, and each one of us got a chance to use the Pixel Stick. And while one person was making a design with this, the other person was doing light painting. So here you have 2 sources of light. The Pixel Stick, which is creating that rainbow effect, and as well as the light painting from a flashlight stage left about 30 feet away. A pixel stick is very interesting. As you can see, these are the founders. I believe they're from Brooklyn. You can basically, it takes an SD card and you can put any design or just use colors. And really, Matt Hill is going to be running a pixel stick station tonight as one of the stations that you can go to on the walk. And I definitely encourage you to play with the pixel stick and play with shooting with that. It's a really, really cool tool. But really, anything can be a tool. This is my iPhone. I walked into the scene with my phone facing the camera, closed it after 15 feet, and then walked out of the scene. You don't see me because this exposure is 4 minutes long and I was only walking in the picture for 15 seconds. This is in Zion on a shoot that I did with Tim Cooper, and I believe this is Tim driving one of the cars up and down the road. So using the car lights and you know, using those to either add light or using them to sort of write with light in the scene. These can be really, really cool ways, again, to put a nice imprint onto your scene. I spoke about power and about the batteries and how they drain very quickly. There's a new product that just came out, and I also was testing it, just came out, and I was testing it in Joshua Tree, and it's by Tether Tools, and it's called the Case Relay Power System. And it's basically made up of 3 components. The one in the middle, which is the case relay, okay? And that's gonna connect to a battery that, again, you can get it for the battery for whatever camera you have, and they have it for Nikon camera and I believe even Sony, Fuji, and Olympus. So you choose that a la carte. The case relay itself is about $99. The battery adapter is about $30. And then in the end, you connect it to a battery pack, a USB battery pack. The one that Tether Tools sells with their kit is a 10,000 milliamp battery pack. Okay, but if you already have a battery pack, you don't need to buy that, and you just plug the case relay into it. I was shooting for about three and a half hours at Joshua Tree with this plugged into my camera. You can see sort of the rig on the tripod right here, and you can wrap it right around your tripod. The green light is the case relay, the red light is the velo intervalometer. I would have taped them up normally because you don't want that sort of spill of light to affect your scene, but it actually was lighting up the scene so we could see it a little bit better. But you can easily wrap the whole system to a tripod leg and keep it compact. Again, I shot for about 3.5, 4 hours, and I was at basically 2/3 battery, which normally I would have probably gone through 2 batteries. So a really, really cool system, especially if you're into night photography and definitely time lapse. And you can unplug that battery. The case relay itself has power in it, so you can swap the batteries out and you're not gonna lose any time. And this is the shot I took, and this is a stack of about, I think, 30 or 40 minutes. Again, probably 5-minute exposure stack of what I was shooting. So you got the behind the scenes scene shot and the shot itself. Some other important accessories that you wouldn't want to leave behind. I know a lot of cameras have sort of the level that's built into the back of the screen. I'm still a fan of the bubble level or the spirit level. They have a 2-way or a 3-way. You put that into the hot shoe, and it really helps you keep level. When you go off axis a bit, the level that's in your screen can sometimes go off axis. The flare buster, which I think Lance recommended in his first book on night photography, and I think B&H actually still sells, that's a really great, it's a black card. And you can get that for $30, or you can also go to an arts and crafts store and get, what I like is a piece of cardboard that's white on one side and black on the other. We'll use that black card to, sometimes the lens shade isn't enough and we're dealing with some flare, and we can kind of just gently nudge that cardboard over. I use the white side of the cardboard to sometimes get a soft bounce of light off of a flashlight to just ease a little bit of light into the scene. Bringing with cases and storage for batteries, gaff tape. I wrap all my flashlights in gaff tape. I even wrap my Sharpies with gaff tape because there's always something that needs gaffing out there. Compasses and triggers. A lot of times we might want to put our flashes inside either a scene, or we want to trigger it remotely. So having some sort of trigger, whether it's a pocket wizard or there's tons of triggers out there, that gives you a little bit more, many options. Lens cloths, those are good, especially in the winter, and those will help you kind of clear off any condensation or any dust or dirt. This is a cool little click seat if we're sitting around, or we're not sitting, we're standing around and waiting. Then it's a nice foldable chair to bring with you for your adventures. And I don't use many filters at night. The main application I'll use for, like, let's say neutral density filters, which I love using during the day, but is with car trails. For a shot like this is the shot from the top of Twin Peaks. This is a 15-minute shot, but the scene was so bright, basically, if I would have stopped down and gone to my lowest ISO, I would have really only been at 4 or 5 minutes. So I used a neutral density filter. I used a 6-stop neutral density filter to get this 15-minute shot and kind of play to the sweet spot of my camera and lens. And finally, and I think Chris is going to talk a little bit more about this, is apps. These are the apps. There's a lot of night apps and scouting apps. Some of our favorites are Photo Pills and the Photographer Ephemeris. Those are great. Those are like $9 or $10 apps, but those are very heavy-duty apps that almost need a book of training onto themselves, but they can tell you where the stars, where the Milky Way are going to be at any location at any given time. Night Sky is a great app that you could just hold up to the sky and find constellations. Dark Sky is an app that will help you find dark skies, which if you're living on the East Coast, there's few and far between. Stellarium is a desktop app, but it's a free app, and that's another great and powerful app that you can, again, find out where constellations, where Milky Way will be. And I really like using moonrise and moon phase, just a quick look at what the phase of the moon is going to be when we're preparing a shoot. And so those are some of my favorite apps. And learning more, again, I think we mentioned, I have my book up here where there's 2 books on night photography, both mine, which is more of probably, I guess, an entry-level book to intermediate, and then Lance's is more of a more intermediate book, but both are excellent books and both complement each other on night photography. We also visit our website at nationalparks.com. We are giving away a free ebook with 20 tips that we've collected amongst each other. It's a free ebook. All you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter. Okay, and if you go to nationalparksatnight.com, go scroll to the bottom, you can see where that sign up is. You can follow us on Facebook, National Parks at Night. Twitter is our Twitter handle there. Also, Chris Nicholson's book on photographing national parks. I've been devouring that book in preparation for the next national parks. It's a great, great reference book to prepare you for those parks. And again, my name is Gabriel. And my website, my personal website, is ruinism.com. Folks, thank you for your time. We'll take other questions at the during the panel.
Well, thank you for coming today. I'm going to be talking about scouting, in particular when you're on a national park shoot. So our first question is, why are we scouting? In fact, that's kind of the question for my talk. And I kind of had this analogy in mind where you kind of think of shooting a national park like eating at a buffet. We've all had this experience, right, where you're at a really nice buffet and you go up and the penne alla vodka looks great and you throw some on your plate, and the shrimp scampi looks great and you throw some on your plate. And your plate's full before you get to the end of the buffet, and that's where you see the lobster and the filet mignon and, I don't know, the bacon. And there's no more room left. So think of a national park kind of like that for a second. So let's, as an example, take a look at Olympic National Park. There's mountains there and wildflowers, wildlife and wildflowers. There's coastline. So you get the waves and tide pools. There's forest, beautiful rainforest in Olympic National Park. Waterfalls, they're all over the place, waterfalls everywhere. There's trails that not only get you places, but are photogenic in themselves. Different times of day, different kind of light conditions, sunrise, sunset, fog, blue light, and of course nighttime. It's a buffet. This is all one national park, and that's not even the biggest one. So you can just jump into a national park that you've never been to and hope that serendipity helps you out. You're going to see some cool things. You'll probably get some good photos. But I can guarantee that at the end of it, you're going to find your plate's full and you're going to miss out on some really great opportunities. So in a nutshell, why are we scouting? Because scouting ahead of time is going to hone our options, and it's going to maximize our chances for creativity. So I can guarantee you, if you do some research, take the time to look at some spots, take the time to read some books, and use some of the tools that I'm about to show you, then you'll have a more productive and more enjoyable shoot. So I'm going to show you a few examples of times that I've scouted locations. This is Yellowstone Falls in Yellowstone. And I had gone to shoot the rainbows. I had read about a particular time of year. If you go to the falls at the right time of the morning, you can get a nice rainbow in the falls. So I had scouted this location by researching ahead of time. However, what I also saw at the same time, in the same area of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone is what they call it, is there was this pinnacle in the canyon, and I saw there was an osprey nest on it. And the light was wrong at that time, but I had some tools that I'll show you later that allowed me to predict what the light would be at a different time. And the problem when I was first there is that that back wall of the canyon was completely lit. So you couldn't even really tell that that pinnacle was there. Everything just kind of blended in together. It would have been a mess as a photo. But a few days later, I was able to come back at a different time of day when I knew that that back wall would be in shadow, and then I was able to make a photo that worked. Another example from Yellowstone is I was there for about a week and a half shoot in 2010, and I had this idea before I went of photographing an erupting geyser and silhouetting it in front of a sunset. So I did a lot of research to try to figure out how to do this. A few things I was looking for. There were three in particular. I wanted a geyser that had some kind of an aesthetic quality to it, so it wasn't just a hole in the ground. I wanted something to actually silhouette. I also wanted a geyser that was going to erupt relatively frequently so that I wouldn't have to wait 3 days if I missed the shot. And I also wanted a geyser that erupted predictably, because there's some, they'll tell you it's going to erupt at noon today, give or take 18 hours. That doesn't work either. So I did a lot of research. I read up on the geysers. I read a couple of photography books about Yellowstone, and I read the website, and I narrowed it down to, this is White Dome Geyser. I liked it because it had the mound. It erupts about every half an hour, and it's almost guaranteed that it's going to erupt at that half hour. It's very consistent. So the first time there, by the way, this is just a scouting shot. So I went during the day to see what the angles would be and to set up my shot, and then went back for sunset. This was the first attempt. I wasn't happy with the sunset. There were too many clouds. It was kind of this interesting silvery light, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. So I went back again a couple days later. It was a better sunset, nice sunlight reflecting off the clouds, and this was closer to what I was looking for. But another thing about scouting is I'll say don't get too married to your idea. Don't get too married to the research, because serendipity is pretty important too. Be open to surprises, which is what happened to me here. I ended up liking this photo a lot better. So I did use my research, I used my scouting to be in the right position at the right time, but I was open to other possibilities and ended up liking just the silhouetted steam. This was my favorite photo from that attempt. So those are a couple examples. I'll show some more examples as we go along of how scouting can improve a photo. But let's go through some scouting tools that I like to use. Google, I love Google. I love the tools that they provide. And we're going to go through a few in particular, and this is all free. One thing that I do before I go to a national park is weeks or months ahead of time. I'll go to Google News and I'll create a news alert. And anytime that national park, so for instance, this summer I'm going to Cuyahoga Valley in Ohio, I'll create a news alert for Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and whenever they show up in the news, I'll get an alert in my email. And this is useful for finding out things about maybe parts of the park that close, or special events that are going on, or maybe there's an early wildflower bloom. For instance, in Death Valley last month, there was a very rare wildflower bloom, and that would have been good information to know if you wanted to head out there. And this is an example. This is something that you get in your email of Zion National Park, Rockfall closed off an area. So if you were heading there next week, this would be useful information. Congaree National Park floods about 10 times a year. If you want to go shoot there, this is pretty useful information to get an alert that, hey, everything's flooded. Maybe you want to pick a different place to go or buy a pair of waders before you travel. Google Earth is an excellent tool. I spend a lot of time on Google Earth before I head somewhere, and there's a few things you can do with it. This is a satellite view of Cades Cove in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Now this is a pretty easy area to shoot. It's about a 12-mile loop road, and you could spend a whole week or 2-week trip shooting just in Cades Cove. It's like it was built, it was like it was planned by a committee of photographers. There's barns and fences and trees and meadows, and there's bears and deer. It's a great spot. But looking at the satellite view, you can see, and just point right over here, there's this little pond. Now there's a trail that goes right here about 100 feet away from this pond. You would never see that pond through the woods from the trail. But here, just looking, I say, you know, I'm going to be here. You can kind of see things that might be off trail. It's such a beautiful spot to shoot morning mist. You can find deer at the edge of it at the beginning of the end of the day. It's a great spot for foliage. And so this is just an example of being able to use Google Maps and use a satellite view to find something that's not on the park map, that's not in the postcards or the photo books, and just kind of find your own little spots that are just a little bit off the beaten track. This is an overhead view of Santa Elena Canyon in Big Bend National Park. And I just want to show you the power of Google Earth and how you can scout a location right from your desk at home. So we can zoom in, kind of, I'll show you the, there's it's the little figure, where is it? Oh, right here. So you can just kind of drag the figure of the person onto the map, and it'll bring you right to a street view. Google just announced a couple weeks ago they have now done street views in 40 national parks. So you can come in and just kind of drop, you could see what a whole route looks like, and you could actually scout a whole drive around a loop road. But then you can zoom in to kind of this virtual reality 3D of the scene. So this is kind of the entrance. You can walk on the trail to get up to the canyon, get up to here. And we're doing all this right from our desk at home. You can see those little icons in there. Those are all photos that people have contributed. You can click on one of those and actually see the work that somebody else has done there, which helps you scout, maybe give you some ideas of what you'd like to shoot. And then, if you see this icon up at the top with the sun, this is actually going to help you see what the sunlight looks like on the landscape at any time of day, at any time of year. You just adjust a slider. So right here, for example, this was what the sun looked like at Santa Elena Canyon on October 24th at 1 o'clock. So not really great light for shooting, right? This is at 4 o'clock, and well, there might be some sadistic photographers among us who would want to take on this exposure, but it looks pretty challenging. So from home, again, I can see this is probably not a spot I want to shoot at 4 in the afternoon. But now, sunrise is looking pretty good that day, isn't it? I mean, sunsetting right into the canyon. Of course, we're talking about night photography today. This also does the same thing at night. So we can go right into the middle of the night and see what the stars are going to look like right from this spot. Not great now, but a little later in the evening, we've got the Milky Way coming right into the canyon. So we can plan a whole shoot around this. Now we've got the sunrise light coming up in the morning. Again, all from your desk at home, you can plan the best times of day that you might want to be at a specific location. I also like to check out Flickr. There's a lot of good photographers on Flickr who are uploading photos every day. You can get really good, up-to-the-minute information about what people are shooting in the parks right now. So if you were going to go to Zion next week, you could go to Flickr and do a search and see what photos are people uploading right now. People who were shooting in the park this week, what are they uploading? Say you wanted to shoot foliage. You could kind of go through and see where the foliage is peaking right now. That's good information because it can save you a lot of time from trying to find where the trees look good when you get there. If you've done a foliage shoot in the parks, then you know how dramatically different it can be. Like in the Smoky Mountains, you could have green leaves at Cades Cove and then nice peak foliage halfway up the mountains, and then you get up into the top of the mountains and the trees are bare already. So this is good scouting information. Another tool I like, and I'm actually wearing it today, is my Yes watch. This is a watch that's designed for 3 people: photographers, pilots, and boat captains. And it has, right from the watch, anywhere in the world you go, sunrise and sunset, moonrise and moonset, moon phase, etc. All the information that we use to plan a shoot at specific locations, right on your wrist. Gabe mentioned the photo ephemeris, and this is one of my favorite on-site tools. So when I get to the park, I have this on my iPad, I have it on my phone, and what it's showing you, all those lines there are showing you the angle of the moonrise and the moonset, and the sunrise and the sunset, along with all the times. So here's an example at Acadia National Park. Gabe and I are doing a workshop at Acadia this May, a night photography workshop. So what I've done is I've placed the pin right between Jordan Pond and Eagle Lake. There's a spot where you can hike up into the ridge between the 2 lakes. And from here, I can see, this is live information from a live shoot. So this is last July, on July 31st. I was there shooting, and I have this information so I can see where the sun is going to set, and that's what I was looking for, because I wanted to do a shoot from up there with sunset light. So not shooting the sun setting itself, but shooting the sunset light on the landscape. I would have liked to have shot Jordan Pond, which is the body of water to the south, but I can see that the sunset's going to be coming here, and there's mountains here. So all along Jordan Pond, this was all going to be in shadow, which is exactly what happened. And I knew this before I even walked up there. So why is this information useful? Because it means I can go somewhere else. So in the same spot, I can see, because of the angle of the sunset, that Eagle Lake is going to be beautifully lit. So all I have to do is walk a few hundred yards up the ridge, and then I get this view with nice, warm, even light. Because this is in a similar spot, but for a night photo. So this line right here, that's the angle of the sunrise. So the sun's rising here, and the light's going to be streaming in this way. That's the sunset, light's coming in this way. And then the same with the moonrise and the moonset on the bottom. There's different views as well, which I'll show you in a second. All right, so here's Jordan Pond, which was the body of water to the south of the map that we were just looking at. So I wanted to do a night shot here. And again, you can do some research. You can go online, right on the National Park website. This is the view from the south end of the pond. It's a gorgeous spot to shoot. But how do you plan a night photo there? So on this night, I was able to look ahead of time. This is during the day, and say, okay, where's the moonlight going to be coming from tonight? So this helped me pick the spot. If the moon was coming from somewhere else, I might have abandoned this idea and gone and tried something else. You could also go to the satellite view. This is, again, right in the app on your phone or on your iPad right in front of you. And this is good because you can stand there during the day and stand right in the spot that you want to shoot and see what the light's going to be doing, 12 hours later. So again, you can see that the moon was going to be rising over here and setting over here. So I knew that in between those times, the moon was just going to be coming like this. So the moon was going to be illuminating from the south. Knowing that, I was able to position myself down at the bottom of the lake with the rocks in the foreground and do this photo. And you can see the rocks lit in the foreground. That's not from a flashlight, that's from the moonlight. And then this as well. A similar app, and Gabe mentioned this one too, is PhotoPills. PhotoPills is, it's a little more powerful, but also a little harder to learn. So much that it would be hard to do a demonstration like this. But on their website, they have videos, really good tutorial videos. There's a learning curve to this, but it's worth looking into if you like doing this kind of research. Another one I like is Skyview, because I love shooting at night, obviously. But aside from the Big Dipper and the North Star, I have no idea what I'm looking at. So Skyview, I could just take my iPad or my phone and point it at the sky, and it tells me exactly what I'm looking at. So if I'm doing a photo of this scene, then I know I've got Orion and Jupiter in there, and I can use that for captioning or keywording. Another app that I use for scouting is Tidegraph, which is very important when you're around the coast. For one, it's important for safety reasons. In a park like Olympic National Park, the tides are so dramatic that you could walk around a point at low tide and not be able to get back again at high tide. So you could be stranded for half a day if you don't have this information. But another reason is because it just changes the look of a scene. So the way that a coastal scene looks at low tide is completely different than how it's going to look at high tide. So if you're scouting, say you're there at in bad light and you say, oh, this looks great, I'm going to come back in 6 hours when the light's nice, it's not going to look the same. So maybe you want to use tide graph to be back at the same tide point later in the week when it coincides with better light. And here's an example from Acadia National Park, just so you can see how dramatic the difference is. So you can see right along here, that's the high tide line. And you can see how much lower the water is actually coming in. And in this case, the tide wouldn't have changed the scene so much, but it would have changed something important to me, is I like having that band of color between where the water is and where the high tide line is. I think it kind of makes the photo because it draws your eye in. A few other tools, some websites, darksitefinder.com. This is Southern California, and you can see how much light is around LA and along the coast. But right in the middle, you can see Death Valley National Park, where Lance and I are doing a workshop in November. It's very dark. In fact, it's one of 3 national parks that's designated gold tiered night skies by the Dark Sky Association. Another tool, just to find out new moon phases, stardate.org, and there's a bunch of places you can do this, but I like this. Just put in the month you're traveling, and you can see what the moon's going to be at different times. Important, 1, if you want to shoot the moon, and 2, if you want to shoot moonlit landscapes. You usually want to work under a full moon for maximum light. Another good tool, human resources, and not the kind that makes you do paperwork. But I'm talking about just talking to other people. So you get to a national park, and you're almost always going to find other photographers. So my first couple days in the park, if I see other photographers, I start a conversation. Just be friendly. Most people are friendly, and they'll help. You can say, hey, have you noticed where the birds are hanging out? Have you noticed where the bison have been hanging out? Any good scenes you've seen on the coast? Where's the foliage? No, just talk. I don't think there's anybody in here who wouldn't help out another photographer on location, right? But then I always say, return the favor. So after you've been there for a week and people are asking you, give them the tips about the cool spots you found. This is a scene, I actually found this exactly this way. This is an Olympic National Park, and I had scouted a site to shoot the sun setting through a natural arch on the coast. And it was a complete bust because right before the sunset, a bunch of kids came out to play right in my scene, which if you like shooting people, that's fine. I just tend to keep them out of my photos. I like pure nature. And the sunset ended up not being that good because some clouds rolled in. But I had already been talking to another photographer, and he was a local, and he knew the area really well. And he said to me, if you just walk about a quarter mile up the beach, you'll find the spot with the sea stacks will just kind of fade off into the horizon. And that's a nice scene. So this night might have been a bust for me if I hadn't just been being friendly and talking to somebody else. This is another one I found just by talking to people. This is in Grand Teton National Park. And in Jackson Hole, in Jackson, Wyoming, I was just talking to people, telling them what I was doing. And they told me if I wanted to find the rams, that the key, first they said where to find them, because I didn't know. I kind of knew where, but I never saw them. But the key is that you can't go out in the morning or in the evening, because that's when the wolves are hunting. And so you don't find them. They'll only come out in the middle of the day when the wolves are gone, which is how I ended up finding them. I just shooting and shooting and shooting until I got bored with them. Another way, my brother lived in Yellowstone National Park for a summer and worked there. And I knew I was going to go out, and he was scouting locations for me for 3 months before I arrived. This is Grand Prismatic, which is I believe it's the largest hot spring in the world. But it's difficult to photograph because you can see the boardwalk there, and that's where most people go to photograph, and it's just huge. It's huge. You can't, all you could really do from there is detail work. But he'd been there, and he'd done a lot of hiking, and he told me this spot where there's no trail. You just have to know where to turn off the trail and hike up this hill, and you get this great vantage point. So my tip here is if you have a sibling, have them go live in a national park. And then also the rangers. It's their job to help us out. I mean, everybody, not just photographers. And this is a spot in Grand Teton National Park, Taggart Lake, that I hadn't read about in any of the photography books or articles that I had read about Grand Teton. I never came across this. But I told a ranger, hey, I'm in the park shooting, and one of the things I'd like to do is do some reflections of the mountains. And she told me, oh, you know where you need to go. It's a place I've been hanging out a lot lately, and it's really beautiful, and it's quiet, and it's not hard to get to. And she told me how to get there. And then the second thing she told me is, don't go today. I didn't know this. She told me there was weather about to roll in, and any wind is going to ruin reflections on the water. So she said, wait till tomorrow after the storm rolls out, and then hike up there. So again, rangers, excellent sources of information. You can also go online. These are some of the spots that I find are very useful for talking to other photographers. LuminousLandscape.com and TravelPhotographers.net both have very active forums. TravelPhotographers.net, their forum is even broken down by region. So you can go on there and find very helpful photographers. Like say you wanted to shoot in Acadia. You can find people who live right outside the park who will help you. You know, tell them, I want to photograph birch groves, or you know, I want to photograph puffins, and they can tell you where to go because they've probably been there 20 times already. Photo.net is a huge forum. There's a lot of international photographers on there, so it's not just US based, but it's very active and you can find great information. If you ever were going to travel to a park overseas, I'd recommend going to the forum there. And nationalparkstraveler.com. It's not a photography site, but they have what do they call it? There's a wiki there for kind of secret spots in the park. You have to sign up, you have to get a membership, but it doesn't cost a lot to access that part of the website. But there's a lot of good insider information there too. Check out things that other people have written about the parks too, that other photographers have written. Bob Hitchman is a photographer based in California who, since 1989, has been doing a quarterly newsletter about the places that he travels, and a lot of them have been national parks. So if you're going to go to, you know, Grand Canyon, go and check out. Bob has 2 newsletters about shooting the Grand Canyon. A lot of great kind of secret spots, not just to shoot, but to eat and to sleep. A lot of useful information, the kind of stuff that we're looking for when we're planning a trip. Also, a lot of the parks have books written about them. Some of the parks have more than one book written about them from a photographer's standpoint. Acadia has 3. The Grand Canyon, I don't know how many. So check out the books too. One tip I'd say here is look for a book written by a photographer. Some of these are written by travel writers who, while they might know the area very well, they don't necessarily know the things that we're looking for. Also, there's a few books about the national parks in general. The one in the middle is excellent, I hear. It's my mom's favorite book. But in the spirit of full disclosure, there are 2 others. The one on the right is by Tim Fitzharris, who's an editor for Popular Photography. Is that right? One of the photo magazines, he's an editor. This book gets a little more specific on locations than I do, but he doesn't cover all the parks, so there's a balance. And Treasured Lands is one that's coming out this August. I'm very excited about this. It was written by QT Luong, who was the first photographer to photograph all 59 parks with a large format camera. He actually hauled an 8x10 into even the remote parks in Alaska, you know, where you either have to be flown in or take a boat. And he's got this book coming out. It's a coffee table book with a lot of nice images, but he's also including information for photographers about every national park. And that's going to be released. I was just emailing with him this week, and they're trying to get it out for August, which is the 100th anniversary. That's the actual anniversary of the park system. Another one for night photography is Tyler Nordgren. We just did a Q&A with him on our blog. He's an astronomer based in California, and he's also an avid photographer. He took a 1-year sabbatical 8 years ago and spent the whole time just photographing night skies of the national parks. So that's a really good combination of experience in this one book. So if you want to get into the parks and do night photography, this is a must purchase. If you're interested, I actually have my copy with me if you want to look at it. So what are we doing with all this information? I mean, you could spend months doing all this research before you go. So how am I organizing it? I get a map of the park. You can get these for free while you're there. I always pick up an extra copy for the next time I go back. Or you can go to the park website and get a PDF and you can print it. They're public domain, so there's no copyright issue to bring it to, FedEx office or Staples and print out a copy. And as I'm doing my research, I'm just making notes on the map. I want to check out this spot. I want to check out this spot. When I get to the park and I'm actually driving and hiking around, I make notes about, here's a good spot for sunrise. Here's a good spot for the fog. And I'm also keeping a list. I group together locations that are close to each other. So I might have, 10 places that I want to shoot in sunrise light, and these 2 or 3 are close together. So maybe I can do them on the same morning. Also, I don't know if it's going to be sunny in the morning. Maybe a fog's going to roll in. So I keep notes about locations that I want to shoot in the fog. That way, if the weather surprises me, I already have a plan. I already have a plan to fall back on and some places to go check out. I don't have to scramble and try to find something off the top of my head. This is kind of an extreme example of some planning. A few years ago, I had to do a winter shoot in Acadia National Park. And I got up there, no snow. And that was all I had to do, is shoot snow scenes. But there was a storm scheduled. Yeah, they scheduled the storm. There was a storm predicted for the end of the week. So I spent the whole week just scouting locations. I think this would look nice in the snow. I think this would look nice in the snow. And then on Thursday night, sure enough, the storm was supposed to come in overnight. So I got my map out. I got a fresh map, and I circled every spot that I wanted to hit. And then got up first thing in the morning, did a clockwise loop around the island, just bang, 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 because I already knew what I wanted to do in every spot, and got through as much as I could before the snow turned to rain. And this is where I started that morning, and this is where I ended up. And it was a very productive day because I had spent 4 days scouting all the spots. Here's an example in the Everglades. If you've ever been there, it's a tough spot to shoot landscapes because the land is just so flat and featureless. So about the only thing you can use is the trees. And I'd found this one that I liked the shape of a lot. It was kind of a little off the beaten path, and I found it. I marked it on the map. And then the next day, a great sunset was coming in. And I said, oh, I know where I'm going. This is at Acadia. Another good reason to scout if you're doing night photography is this is not the kind of spot that I would want to be walking around in the dark if I didn't already know the area, because that's kind of a steep fall into cold water and rocks and waves. So I had scouted this spot during the day, knew what I wanted to shoot, and then came back to do it in the dark. Another good reason to scout. This is Jordan Pond in Acadia National Park, but it's a spotted Jordan Pond that you probably wouldn't walk to if you'd never been there before. The way the trail goes around the pond, there's kind of a natural stopping point where you get to a point and you're like, well, everything's kind of looked the same so far, and that's where most people turn back, especially in the dark. If you can't see, you'd be like, well, that's enough. But anybody who turned back would have been pleasantly surprised to go another 200 yards and find a nice little inlet where the water's nice and calm, and there's a lot of just rocks and there's logs in the water, and if you turn about 90 degrees from this spot, there's a nice marsh with a bridge, a walking bridge on it. So again, I probably wouldn't have found this if I had just gone in the dark, but because I already knew the area, I knew where to go this evening. This is Yellowstone National Park. We were there. I was there with my brother in the winter shooting, and we went during the day just to see where the hot springs had melted the water, had melted the snow. And so I had a spot to go to later that evening when we came back in the dark. This is in Death Valley. It's Zabriskie Point. Actually, I was with Lance. The first night there, the light was just too flat. But I saw a composition I liked, marked it on the map, came back later when the light had some more contrast to it. This is in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I liked the, I forget what they call it, the trough of water going to the mill. But when I first scouted it, it was midday, very dappled light coming through the trees. Bright sunlight is the worst to shoot in a forest. So I knew to come back. I marked it on the map. I want to come back when it's a little more overcast. This is in Cades Cove in the Smoky Mountains. I loved this tree in the meadows, this huge oak tree. But the light was just too flat, kind of harsh my first time there. I marked it down, went back for sunrise, walked right out into the meadow and spent about an hour getting different photos of it. It's in the Everglades, and again, the Everglades is tough to do landscape photography, but I found this spot. This is at 9 Mile Pond, where from the shore, I knew Miami was going to be 120 miles in the background, which was going to give me some light, just looking for something, hoping for clouds, there'd be some light, just another compositional element in the photograph. Again, just all locations that I scouted. This is a bison in Yellowstone. I was there, I mentioned, with my brother doing a winter shoot, and most of the park is closed off to vehicles. We didn't have the time to do a snow coach and get into the interior of the park, but I knew from reading what parts we could get to with a car at that time of year. And one was the road that goes almost all the way out to Cook City. So this is in the Hayden Valley, which I knew the road would bring us if we went far enough. And from research, I know that the Hayden Valley is a great spot to find bison in the winter. And I knew from previous experience there and notes that I had taken that the light is just gorgeous in the valley at the beginning and the end of the day. So when we had one day and had to pick one spot to go, because of research and notes I had done before, I knew exactly where to bring us. It's a similar, this is not actually the Yellowstone River, but it's along the drive along the Yellowstone River, which I had scouted for S-curves. And at one point, I mean, if you're driving down this road, you get the Yellowstone River for like 30 miles just hugging the road. But I went off to the other side to see what was there, and I found, you wouldn't call this an S-curve. I don't know what kind of curve this is, but I thought it was really cool. And this was just because 2 days before I was actually shooting in good light, I drove through it in the afternoon and just looked everywhere and took notes. And then just 2 more photos, and this is in the category of another photographer helping you out. I mentioned Lance and I are doing a night photo workshop in Death Valley. So we met in December out there, just scouting locations. I went out and just shot and scouted. And this is in the Furnace Creek Resort. I never would have walked into a resort to try to shoot. But Lance had been there, and he led me in, and we spent a few hours there doing some great work. And then Lance also brought me here. This is Rhyolite Ghost Town, which was a fantastic spot to shoot at night. So those are all the tools I used to scout, and I highly recommend doing your research before you go so that you don't fill your plate with pasta before you go. So.
I'm going to talk about how to make your night photographs stand out from ordinary photographs, or just make yours a little bit more special. And there's so many night photographers and night photography workshops. There's so many people out photographing at night these days that images can become kind of run-of-the-mill. And I'm going to show you some simple tips and tricks, not so much tricks, but just skills to learn to have in your camera bag to make for better photographs. So somebody mentioned earlier I didn't get the memo about the shirt. Well, stand out, Yeah. All right. So night photography, as I said, has become much more mainstream, much more common. I'm seeing nocturnal images in media and advertising all over the place. And it seems like every time you look on any photo sharing site or Facebook or anything, somebody else is posting another Milky Way photograph. And they tend to look the same after a while. Just the arc or the central core of the Milky Way rising up from the landscape, and it can be a little bit boring. It's thrilling the first time you photograph the Milky Way and get it on an image, and then see that it's big and bold and dynamic, and especially if you live in an urban area and you don't often get to see it. So seeing it is one thing, photographing it entirely another. But to make your photographs a little bit more distinctive, there are a number of things that you can do. One of those is lighting. So adding light to nighttime photographs. Natural light landscapes without any added light can be kind of dull or can look just like slightly strange daylight. But when you add some light to it, especially a colored light that contrasts with the natural light, things get really interesting. I like to keep my lighting subtle, though. You know, there are plenty of photographers who use big, bold, strong colors and big swaths of light, lots of different colors. To me, if it's not believable, if it doesn't look like it could actually exist in the world, you know, to me that's not so much a natural landscape, and it's not the way that I like to photograph. Next, add some kind of foreground element to your photographs. Again, you know, just the horizon line and the Milky Way, we've seen that before, and there's not a whole lot to differentiate, you know, one photograph from the next in that regard. So the challenge with photographing the night sky and foreground elements is depth of field. Gabe mentioned earlier that we're going to be limited with shutter speeds if you're trying to get star points. As due to the Earth's rotation, after so many seconds, the stars will start to become trails rather than points. So you're going to be pushing the limits of your camera. Both the shutter speed is going to be limited by the stars. You're going to be shooting in a wide aperture and high ISO. You're really pushing all those limits. So real challenge is getting enough depth of field and using good focusing techniques like Gabe mentioned, the hyperfocal focusing. I just learned of a new focusing tool called Sharp Star 2 that is, it's a tool that's derived from something astronomers use on telescopes, and it's basically a little filter that you put in front of the lens, and then you're able to focus on stars because it'll basically create like a star pattern that comes into alignment when you get the sharp focus. And that is Sharp Star 2. It's available from lonelyspec.com. A guy named Ian Norman is a night photographer who is marketing this product. So there are lots of options. Composition. Pay careful attention to your composition. Consider how all the different parts of the frame, the foreground, the middle ground, the background, how do they all relate to each other, and how do they create visual movement in the frame? When you look at an image, does your eye go to one space? Are your eyes led out of the frame? Are they led around the picture? Do you have leading lines? How do all those different elements relate to each other, and do they make for a stronger composition? And especially in low light situations where you really can't see all that well, when, like say you're working for Milky Way shots with star points, you're out when there's no moonlight, and it can be really, really difficult to see anything, especially in the corners of your frames or the edges of your frames. So doing high ISO test shots and refining the shot just to make sure you have the framing just right. It's terrible to do a shot like this and then get home and find that you've, cut off the edge of the radio antenna or radio telescope on the left there, something like that. So, and it is helpful and useful to learn basic astronomy techniques to understand where and when you'll find the moon, the Milky Way. Understand that if you're photographing towards the north, the stars are going to revolve around the North Star, and they're going to be shorter relative to photographing the same exposure to the south. So learning which way the stars are going to be angled if you're doing long star trails. Are they going to go to the left or to the right? And how's that going to affect your composition? So, look for unique subject matter. I do photograph in national parks, obviously, quite a lot. But my own work, I often find man-made elements. I look for little man-made elements in the landscape, and to me, that tends to add some kind of mystery, mysteriousness, and just a different quality than a pure landscape. This was from last November when I was out there in Death Valley with Chris, and it's submerged water tank for the Furnace Creek Resort. But in this photograph, and if you look very carefully on top of the little moon dome there, you can see Chris and my friend Tom standing up there. It's not aliens, but an image like this, it's really mysterious. You have no idea what that is, and that's one of the things that I like about night photography, is that element of unknown. It's all the things that are associated with darkness and night, mysteriousness, loneliness, solitude. So anything I can add to my photographs to transform an ordinary situation into something a little bit different or more unusual, that's for me makes an exceptional photograph. Yeah, I think this is a fairly surreal scene. Okay, and pay attention to details. This is also rhyolite in Death Valley, and this is a single 30-minute exposure made on a moonless night with a little bit of added lighting on the facade of the building. I said in an earlier, a few minutes ago, keep your lighting subtle. I think this is extremely subtle, and to me, it's much more interesting than splashing huge amounts of light onto your subject. Now, if you look right here, you see this little stripe of green light. That is from a mercury vapor street light that's about 300 yards away on the old train station up at Rhyolite. And then this light here is also ambient light from a sodium vapor street light that's also up in that same location. And it's just falling at such it's very dim, and I could barely perceive that light with my eyes, but over the course of 30 minutes, it accumulates on the image. The lighting that I did is on the front facade of the building to bring out the texture there. So, again, pay attention to details. Make sure you've got the best possible exposure. And when you're working in a natural environment like this, histogram is the best tool for help to determine your exposure, the RGB histogram. Okay. Focus. Focus is absolutely critical, especially because you'll very typically be shooting at wide apertures. Again, if you have a foreground element and stars in the background, you want to have both in focus. You need to know what your depth of field is going to be and where you need to focus to get both foreground and background sharp. Hyperfocal focusing is a technique I recommend that you learn how to use if you don't. There are a number of apps that you can download to find hyperfocal distance points. The one that I use is called TAC Sharp, T-A-C-K Sharp. And it's about $2 for any given camera format, focal length, and aperture. It will tell you what is the hyperfocal distance, and from there you'll be able to tell your depth of field. Hyperfocal distance, just very briefly, is the nearest point that you can focus and still maintain infinity in sharp focus. So if you focus at the hyperfocal distance, you have from half of that distance to infinity as your depth of field. So let's say hyperfocal distance, you look it up on the app based on your camera, your lens, and your aperture, it says 50 feet. If you focus at 50 feet, your depth of field will be from 25 feet to infinity. Focus using magnified live view. You can use that Sharpstar 2 from lonelyspec.com. Also use a flashlight. Can be very useful. Go out, either stand by your camera, illuminate something from the camera position with a flashlight, or you can put the flashlight into the scene and then focus on the light itself, retrieve it, and take your picture. But there's nothing really more discouraging and disappointing than you go on a trip, to a national park and spend your vacation there and get home and find that, all of your star trails or your star points are just slightly out of focus. So, and I can't emphasize that enough. Focus is really, really, really critical, and you need to pay very careful attention to it. After you take your shot, zoom into 100% magnification and just make sure that it's, everything is sharp and crisp the way you need it to be. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, sometimes, you'll find that you've cropped not quite the way you wanted to, or there may be some unintended element in your frame. Something, just now if he was standing there, I think I'd probably notice him, but you may not notice if there's a piece of trash or some litter. Yeah, you may not notice a piece of trash in your photograph, but I find that it's better to control your situation in camera and do as minimal post-processing as possible. So we could clone out Mr. Trump, but I'd rather go and take him out of the photograph before I make the exposure. So, okay. Good post-processing is also important to spectacular or stellar night photographs. So again, try to do as much in camera as possible. Get it right in camera and keep your post-processing to a minimum. Just like the lighting, I want it to be subtle. So use a light touch. Especially easy on noise reduction, sharpening, and clarity. Those are the things that people tend to go overboard on, and at low resolution can make an image look great, but when you start printing or looking at larger pictures, too much noise reduction can really mush out your detail, and you compensate for it by over sharpening, and then you get highlights and artifacts along contrast edges. And clarity, if you use too much clarity, you get kind of the same effect there. So be judicious with your use of those. Okay. And then don't forget lighting. Lighting is really one of the most powerful and expressive ways that we have to photograph at night. So sometimes, the elements and nature doesn't really, all those things they conspire against you. They don't come together to give you what you're looking for. This is Bristlecone National Monument in the White Mountains of the Eastern Sierra in California. It's quite an ordeal to get up there. It's at almost 12,000 feet, and walking around with your camera gear at 12,000 feet is a challenge. It's freezing cold because it's so high, and close to an hour on a dirt road. Once you get up into the mountains, there's another hour on a really rough dirt road to get there. And I arrived with a group with increasing cloud cover, and it's looking like we're not going to have the clear starry sky that we wanted to have. But fortunately, because we were up there before it got dark, we had some time to work with, and that's when this image was made. It's completely clouded over. It's just starting to rain. We're not going to see any stars. We're not going to see any moonlight, but there's still a little bit of residual light in the sky, and that gave us about 20 minutes to work with. So I had a group of 5 people with me, and we all set up. Normally, we're not all photographing the same thing, but because we had limited time to work with, we set up around this magnificent tree, and I went to work at lighting it. But by the time we finished with this, it was completely dark, and there was nothing but a black sky. And I found that those photographs without any kind of detail and just a pure black sky are not as interesting to me. So take advantage of whatever you have to work with. So typically when we talk about moonlight photography, most people initially think of photographing the moon itself. But night photographers generally photograph by the light of the moon. So the moonlight provides light for the landscape, obviously. But it also means that most of the dimmer stars are obscured. So, again, that's part of the planning. It's part of what I like to call being proactive versus reactive. And this goes along with Chris's scouting there. If you're proactive, you do your research, you do your scouting, you plan out, you know what to expect when you get to a location. If you're reactive, you just show up and, deal with whatever you have. So I think both ways are, legitimate ways of working, but I think it's useful to have some idea to know what to expect so you can be more prepared. But in a moonless situation, most people these days are doing very high ISO short exposures for star points. And in moonlight, most people do native or low ISO long exposures for star trails. But you're not limited to 100 ISO or 6400 ISO. We've got everything in between to work with. So this shot here is a 20-minute exposure, no moonlight whatsoever. And I don't remember the settings exactly. It was probably 800 ISO and still very, very dark. But that long 20-minute period there gave me plenty of time to do the lighting on this image. So we had a light placed underneath of the arch that was a very, very dim. It was one of those little tea lights. And it's just on a rock underneath the arch, and over the course of the exposure, it built up that light there. There is some light on the rock in the foreground from to the right of the camera, and then the light on the left, on the middle ground there, was from camera left. So look for unique and different compositions. This is Mobius Arch in the Alabama Hills, which is Alabama Hills, if you're not familiar with it, Bureau of Land Management, land that has many, many, many natural arches. Most of them are much smaller than in Arches National Park. Mobius Arch in this image is the most famous, and it's the one where you're likely to find lots of other photographers when you show up day or night. And most people photograph Mobius Arch horizontally because if you look right here, this is Mount Whitney, tallest mountain in the continental US. And if you get perched on those round rocks to the left side of the frame, you can look through Mobius Arch and get Mount Whitney in the background. But you know, I've seen that's really a sunrise photograph, because you're looking to the west out over the Sierras. And I've seen, that image time and time and time again. So I wanted to find a more unique angle, a more unique perspective. So I chose a vertical shot, got down below it, and then used this brush in the foreground, these plants, as a foreground element. Again, this is a longer exposure that gives me time to do some lighting, and hopefully, again, keeping it somewhat subtle. Obviously you're looking at this, you know that there's added light to it, but it's not screaming in your face. One thing that I find beginning night photographers do over and over and over again is they see something that gets them excited and they really want to photograph it, get all worked up about it, make one or two exposures, and it's not quite coming together the way they expected. They say, oh, geez, it's just not going to work, and move on to the next thing. And they do that all night, night after night after night, or shot after shot, and never really come away with anything. So it takes perseverance. You find something that you think is going to make a good shot, do it over and over again, making little adjustments and little refinements in the exposure, in the lighting, and the composition, until you get it the way you want it. That is the way to get successful night shots. You're not necessarily going to set up a camera, plop it down, take a picture, and be done with it. It's not uncommon for me to invest an hour or more in a single shot, even if it's a short exposure, even if it's a 5-minute exposure. I might spend an hour or an hour and a half planning the shot, carefully composing it, and working out different sorts of lighting. Okay. So, a couple of just things that occur to me to include in here. I think that really, we think of workflow generally as starting when we take the memory card and put it into our computer and download our images. But having a consistent and methodical way of working out in the field makes for a better experience. So what do I mean by that? in your camera bag, arrange it in such a way that you know where everything is, and give every piece of equipment a specific place. So you can just reach down and grab your wide-angle lens, or reach down and grab extra batteries, or whatever you need. You don't want to have to break your stride and tear your whole bag apart just to find your cable release. And along with that, learn how to use your camera inside and out. It's very frustrating if you're out in the field in pitch dark and you're trying to find some particular setting, scrolling through the menus, and you don't have your manual. Learn your camera inside and out. Know it really well. Take the time, in the comfort of your own home, sit down with your camera manual, learn all the features, the functions, how to work through the menus, find your night photography settings. You can set up the custom user modes or the custom exposure modes with all of your night photography settings. It's very common and typical for people, even in a remote natural environment, to want to just kind of walk around with a big bright flashlight just to get to your location, or to do your scouting by waving a big flashlight around. And what I will say about that is, think about the experience of driving down a country road in the middle of the night with no moonlight and nothing but your headlights. You see what's in front of your car for 50 yards or so, and nothing else. You don't see anything. And that's basically the same thing that happens if you're out walking around with a flashlight. You see what the flashlight is illuminating, but you miss the rest of the landscape. So give your eyes time to adapt to the dark, and try to, as much as possible, move around without any sort of light. And if you do need to use some light, make it a red one that'll help preserve your night vision. I'm getting to the age where I need reading glasses, and it's more difficult to focus, and the low light vision isn't quite what it used to be. But I still find that if I spend 20 minutes to half an hour outside, or if I'm outside from sunset into darkness, by the time it gets dark, I can make my way around with no moonlight whatever. Just by starlight, I can usually manage to get around. And it makes for a better experience, and it makes for better photographs. So try different lighting techniques. My number one lighting tip is never ever light from behind the camera. It looks like on-camera flash. So you're typically from 45 to 180 degrees position from your camera. Backlighting, side lighting is always going to be more dramatic and more interesting than direct frontal lighting from the camera position. So, and I typically, in a natural environment, like Gabe mentioned, prefer warmer incandescent lights to LED lights, or gelled or filtered LED lights. And the reason for that is that the warm light contrasts very nicely with the cool blue natural light, and I think you've seen that in some of these images here. Do a shot over and over again until you get one that you like. Don't delete anything out in the field, because although I try to get everything right in camera, there's always sometimes when some kind of mishap happens. Somebody walks through your frame with a headlight on, or an airplane goes through the sky, and that's your best shot, right? So if you have other similar shots, you may be able to, patch in a piece from another exposure to make the accident go away, if you will. And again, most night photographers shooting moonlit landscapes will shoot at 100, and astrophotographers or astro landscape photographers photographing the star points or Milky Ways, 6,400, maybe 3,200, maybe 12,800. But don't be afraid to use the in-between ISOs. I've been doing that more and more lately, and I find that on moonless nights, and this is my attempt to move away from those kind of commonplace, mundane Milky Way shots, is I'm photographing longer star trail exposures, but not by moonlight, but by just by starlight. And again, that gives me time to add my lighting. But at 100 ISO, it would take hours, and you'd have to stack lots of exposures together. It just really doesn't work. So photographing at 4, 8, or even 1600 and exposures in the range of 5 minutes to half an hour works very well for the kind of work that I'm doing in these images that you've seen here. A lot of people like to work alone, but in this kind of environment, for safety reasons, for camaraderie, and just to bounce ideas off of each other, it's really great to go out and work with a partner, work with a friend. Can't emphasize that enough. I've almost always, in my long career of night photography, always go out with somebody else. And we don't stand next to each other and take the same shot, but we're generally in the same area and kind of check in with each other over time. And I might get my friend to help with lighting if it's at a particularly difficult spot that I might not be able to climb up to. One person can do lighting, one person can work the cameras. Partnering, working together is, really, I think, one of the most productive ways of improving your nighttime photography. Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier that I tend to photograph man-made things in the natural environment. Well, somehow I seem to end up photographing, the restrooms in national parks. So my friend Suzanne here, who's in the audience here, came up with the term "lose with views." So that's a new project for me. But I've got these two different versions here. This is at Zabriskie Point in Death Valley, and these two photographs were made within 10 minutes of each other. Very, very different, right? The first one, the light on the loo, is a car that was pulling out of the parking lot, and the headlights just swept across the building as I happened to be doing an exposure. It's a short exposure. You've got the bluish sky, star points, and kind of soft lighting on the outhouse there. The other exposure, you can tell by the star trails, it's a longer exposure, and the reason that the color is so different is that over that longer exposure, the artificial lights from Furnace Creek in the distance, the sodium vapor lights, bounced up or went up into the sky and reflected off the clouds. So, and then I also obviously went into both the men's and the ladies' room and did some lighting there and put some light behind the fence as well. But again, this is the kind of thing where you see one thing, and by experimenting and working and trying different combinations of exposures and lighting, you end up with something completely different than where you started with. And here's another one. This is from Trona, the Trona Pinnacles in the Mojave Desert. These are this is also BLM land, not a designated park, but a really interesting area of these giant tufa formations. And the lighting here, I think you can probably work it out pretty easily. I went behind the outhouse and put some LED flashlight onto the rock and the dirt pile there, and then just a tiny little bit on the inside to light up that window there. I just wanted to have, I'm not going for full disclosure here. I think this is a critical point. Your photographs do not have to be completely literal, and I think if they are, if you show all the details of every element of the images, it's not that exciting. If you have some of the detail hidden, or you just give a suggestion of what's there, it makes the viewer more interested or trying to figure out exactly what's going on there. So that's my approach to working with lighting, and maybe glamorizing something that you wouldn't necessarily think to photograph. So anyway, stay tuned for more Lose with Views. So my website is thenightsky.com, and Sky has an E on the end of it. It's named after the Isle of Skye, and my son, who's named after the Isle of Skye as well. So on there, I do workshops as well as the National Parks at Night workshops. other locations around the country, international photo tours to Iceland, Cuba, Scotland, and Ireland. I have online classes, and you can also order the book if you don't happen to get one today. So thanks very much.
Thanks, y'all, for coming out. It's great to see you guys. I think you can tell we all like to teach. We really enjoy sharing, and gives us a great opportunity. It's also a real honor to be up here with these guys. It's a little intimidating to follow these three folks, but yeah, right. But I want to talk to you about painting with light. Lance had mentioned it quite a bit, and we're going to take it a little bit further in this talk. So basically, painting with light is, as we said, just adding light into a scene, right? And that could be done several different ways. You can do it with a flashlight, which I think is most common, at least for us up here, or even a flash. But it really takes night photography to a new level. So whether you're photographing on a full moon night here, we've got some clouds. This is outside of DC. Add a little light in with a flashlight, and it becomes a completely different scene, right? In Zion National Park, which Gabe was just mentioning, we're doing some star points and getting ready, and we'll talk to you about how to prepare for your light painting. But then add a little bit of light in, and it drastically changes, the way the scene is going to appear. Or it could be completely moonless. Here there was so very little light, I was literally crawling around on my hands and knees because I couldn't see to paint this arch. And then, of course, a very long 15-minute exposure to catch the star trails behind it. Or it could even be adding in flash, right? So in this case, I used a combination of both light painting and flash. So I was using a blue gel to light paint the tombstones. And then I took a little spray bottle of water and spritzed it over and flashed it from behind, so the instantaneous flash would kind of give some atmosphere to it. So, we've already seen through many of the images before that light painting can really add a lot to a scene. But the thing that's really cool about it, people, is that it's different. It's a different kind of look that you get from your scene. It's nothing that we can create in other ways. It would be very difficult to do it with light modifiers such as soft boxes and other flash units, but that look is just really, really unique. What you can do with a flashlight is absolutely splendid. You can create these little pockets and pools of light, different brightness levels and different colors to really bring out a scene. This was also a full moon night, and every bit of light that you see here was created with a flashlight. Literally walking down those stairs with my flashlight, painting along the handrail, and then this little area in here painted as if it was coming from above, and then the building painted from, or rather the little metal shack painted from several different angles, and the old gas pump as well, and then a little bit of light thrown in back there on that old windmill. So it's a really unique way to add light that you just can't do with other light sources. Here was a shoot that Gabriel and I did together, and working as a team, as you've heard already, can be very, very powerful. We had, I think it was 3 people on this shot, or maybe it was even 4.
Albert as well.
Albert as well, that's right. A little shout out to our friend Albert. But there was 4 people, and we each had our own little thing to do. Gabriel was inside with a flash, popping inside. We had somebody painting the back of the bus. We had somebody else painting the front of the bus. And then I was on headlight duty. So I was literally tossing dust up into the air and shining the flashlight through the dust to appear as the headlights were on. So working as a team is great. But the real idea here is that when you're using a flash or you're just standing by your camera, the light is just sort of unflattering. It's what we call flat light or front light. And when you start to move with your flashlight and change out colors, change your gel on your flashlight, and move around, your scene is going to drastically change. So here was a little painting on the inside from the camera, and then I walked outside of this caboose with a yellow gel on my flashlight, and you can see how I threw the light inwards, and so we're highlighting the frames of the door here. So it's so much more than just doing a very broad, even light, you can really be somewhat surgical with your light source, and we'll talk about approaches to that. But again, moving around to the back of the caboose and painting in underneath the mattress, and then again the lights from the other side coming in through the windows. Now, here's a classic example of standing at the camera and just illuminating the whole scene from behind the camera. It's very flat. It's not at all interesting, and it would be as if you were taking your on-camera flash and just popping it. We've all seen that look, right? So what we can do with different angles and different intensities of light is really bring out a scene to make it so much more interesting. So in this case, to get the texture on the concrete, the dirt on the concrete, my flashlight was very low, literally about 4 or 5 inches off the ground, to illuminate the whole of the floor. The building itself was painted from 2 sides. So I painted it from this side, and then I went around and painted from the other side. And again, my light was about, 6 or 8 inches off of the wall. So it's a very, a very hard side light. And then the chair, I got up very close and hid the flashlight from the camera and painted the chair. And because I was closer to the chair, of course, it's a little bit brighter than everything else. But I painted the back of the chair and the seat of the chair separately with the flash beam. So there's a lot of different angles, and there's a lot of different distances to control both the light and the intensity. So when can you paint with light? All the time, you guys. Anytime it's dark, right? That's all right. That's all right, Lance. Let's check out the first one, complete darkness. Now, this makes a lot of sense, of course. You can paint with light when it's dark, right? But it can be difficult because you can't really see all that well. And when the flashlight is, when you're illuminating your scene, you can become a little bit blinded by the light, but it's really possible. So here I was in a solitary confinement, and the room that I was photographing in was completely dark. So I set my ambient exposure for the background, and that was about a 1-minute exposure. So you can imagine how dim this cell was, even where there was some light coming through. This was 1 minute at f8. And then with the flashlight, I added all of this light coming out of the cell. So that's just one flashlight, standing there for a minute painting. And of course, again, you can see how important the angle of the flash is. Or even little things like you can see that the shadow is kind of sharp, right? So that comes from holding your flashlight in one position. So if I was to do this with my flashlight over and over again, what it would do is it would create a very soft shadow. It would be much like a softbox. Imagine if I took my flashlight and did this in a square, I'd be basically creating a soft light. But if I take the one beam and just go at the same angle, then it will create those hard shadows. All right, so, but complete darkness, absolute ton of fun to shoot in the complete darkness. Or even moonlit nights. We think, well, gosh, it's so bright out there. Bright out there for nighttime photographers, right? Moonlit night, full moon. But you can still have enough time to paint. So in this case, this was a 3-minute exposure. It was ISO 200 at f8, and there's no light painting. This is in the Grafton Ghost Town, just outside of Zion National Park, one of the places we visit on our workshop. And then during the next 3-minute exposure, I went in and light painted the entire house. Of course, there's no electricity there. It's a ghost town, so everything you see was done with either a flash or the flashlight. Another full moon shot. This was a great night, very serendipitous. It's not often you get fog at night, right? That's usually in the morning, that radiant fog that comes up. But I was lucky to have fog here, and it was a fairly short exposure, about 1.5 minutes, which is short for us. And I just wanted to highlight the bench. So what I did was I stood behind the tree, and I put a little bit of light on the back of the bench, and then I pointed my flashlight up to illuminate some of the branches. And so we have just a kiss of light right? You heard Lance talk about subtlety, and realism, and it's a really important thing to do, I think, in certain situations when you don't want it to be over the top with the light painting. So, here's a case for that. And then even if you can work with shorter exposures, you can mix in ambient light. I'm not quite sure whether we'll get to that on the photo walk tonight, but certainly people are interested. We can try a little bit. We'll set our ambient exposure and throw some flashlight in there. But typically these exposures are going to be a little bit shorter. So this was an 80-second exposure at f5. And again, this was on the workshop that Gabriel and I used to run. And I wanted to throw, of course, some light in there to, complement that full moon and really illuminate the, neon signs here. So, make sense so far, people? We want to add in light. We can change our angle. We can change our color. We can change our distance. So where do we start, right? Where do we begin? Well, first things first. We generally want to use lower ISOs for light painting. We want long extended period of time to, have time to walk around the scene and illuminate our subject. So clearly with a 30-second exposure, we're very limited on time. So we want nice low ISOs. And that also helps us out with what? Noise, right? Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that these days we're so used to seeing, pictures on our phone or our tablets, and viewing them small, you really can't see a lot of difference between a low ISO and a high ISO. But when you make prints like this, the size, then you really start to see every little bit of detail and where the higher ISOs can be troubling. And so, here's 100% blow up of each of those. And you can just see it's not as crisp. And you've got some, the detail isn't quite there. Now, of course, when we're shooting star trails, we want some of these higher ISOs, or star points rather. But in situations like light painting, low ISOs is the way to go. So 100 or 200. As you may guess, you're gonna need a sturdy tripod, right? That camera's gotta stay absolutely still. So get yourself a nice sturdy tripod, and we heard Gabriel talk about some of those. Of course, flashlights, I'll cover some different brands and what to look for. And then some gels or light modifiers to help us control the spill of the light, the color of the light, and so on and so forth. All right, now, if you're on a tripod, you should be using a cable release, right, people? I mean, we got to keep this camera steady. I like these little Velo ones. I use those quite often. But Gabe had mentioned another one, which is even more valuable, the Shutter Boss, simply because you can absolutely set the timing every time. So if you want to get precisely a 2.5-minute exposure or a 3-minute and 20-second exposure, you can dial in the Shutter Boss to make that happen. Now the other thing is our range of exposures is in bulb, right, you guys? I mean, we're talking about very long exposures that can vary from anywhere from 60 seconds to 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 15 minutes. So we're going to be looking at bulb. Now, how do we paint with light? This is really easy, people. Seriously, this is all you have to do. Experiment. I'm serious. When I first learned about this, again, like most of us up here, it was with film. And it was a lot of experimentation. Having that rear LCD to see our image right away, I cannot even tell you how much easier it makes it for us as digital photographers. But we have got to experiment. You heard Lance say that he wants you to keep trying a shot over and over and over and over again until you get it right, and that's absolutely true. That's what we need to do. Very rarely will you paint something for the first time, one exposure and go, oh yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's not going to happen. As you're painting, you're looking at the LCD in the back and you think, oh, okay, I need more light there or less light here. I want it to be broader here, tighter here. And so it's nearly impossible just to step up and take one great shot, right? So we've got to experiment. But we're going to begin with our focus. If it's really dark, your camera can't see at all and you're not going to be able to depend on that autofocus, right? So we're going to move to our manual focus, or there's a couple of other things you can do, of course. If you have a light source that's at a similar distance, you can focus on the light source and then recompose your camera. Or even better, and this is what we do most of the time, is we use our flashlight to autofocus. So I don't know how many times we've taken our flashlight and we'll just hold it over there for the group to focus on, you know, because it's sometimes a little tough to manhandle both of them, but you put your flashlight on your subject and then you can actually use your autofocus or your live view or your manual focus to make it happen. All right. Now, you've also heard the word workflow. We've talked about that. So if we're in complete darkness, imagine this now, you're in a room with absolutely no light. The only light that's going to hit the sensor is coming from your flashlight. All right, so we've got to start somewhere. We'll start by putting our camera in manual mode. We don't want aperture priority, obviously, shutter priority, any of that. We're going into manual mode, all right? And just to pick a place to start, let's just say ISO 200 at f8. As I look back through most of my light painting photographs, I see a pattern of ISO 200 at f8. That's not to say I keep it that all the time, but it's a great place to start, all right? Now what we're going to do, again, imagine just a dark room. You set your ISO at 200, you set it at f8, and you illuminate a subject, and then you turn off your flashlight. You have no idea whether it's the right amount of light or not, right? But that's where the experimentation comes in. You now look at your rear LCD, and you decide whether you need to add or take away light. So our next step is to just begin adding light in, all right? There is so many variables here, people. There are so many variables. What power flashlight do you have? How close are you to your subject? Is the subject a dark wood that absorbs a lot of light? Or perhaps it's a lighter color rock that reflects a lot of light? So there's no way that we can tell you, point your flashlight at that subject and put your beam on it for a total of 15 seconds and you'll get a good exposure. You just never know. So what do? Experiment. That's it, right? So once we add some light in, then we're going to check our exposure. Of course, you can use your histogram, look at the rear LCD. One good idea is to actually turn your LCD down to its lowest setting. All right, most LCDs will allow you to lower the brightness. By doing so, you're not going to, number one, ruin your night, adjusted vision. But number two, it's going to be a little bit closer to what it's going to look like when you get back to the computer. Our eyes are, our pupils are so dilated at this point from working in the dark that when we see the LCD, and if it's normal brightness, we just think, wow, that's so bright. I can't believe how awesome I am. And then you get back on the computer and you're like, my gosh, I can barely see the image. Where is it? It's underexposed. So lower your LCD and check your exposure. And then simply add or subtract time with the flashlight. I mean, that's it. Imagine, again, we're in complete darkness. So if it's not bright enough, you spend more time with the flashlight or you get closer. All right. So, case in point, I stepped up to this little scene in this ghost town, and that was my first attempt. Right? Pretty poor. So I made another attempt. That's not very good either, right? And I thought, I'm going to paint it from both sides, and so we did that. And I'm putting a little light back on the doors and a little light on the sides here, but still not good enough. So I tried that. That was my, And then finally I decided I got to paint this thing for a lot longer to illuminate it, and finally I ended up with that. So you're not going to step up the first time and just paint it and have it be great. Nah, you've got to experiment, all right? Now, what happens if we have mixed ambient light? And that could be, that could be street lights, that could be full moon, that could be a quarter moon, whatever it is. If there is some light and you can see, that's our ambient light setting, right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to find our base exposure with a high ISO setting. And again, f8. So what we'll do then is we'll extrapolate back to take the seconds into minutes, right? Now, of course, because we want to have time to move around with our flashlight. So what it'll look like is something like this, folks. We're going to do our higher ISO test shots at something like 6400 ISO. And we can employ what we call the 6-stop rule. So if I get a good ambient exposure at 1 second at f8, That means when I go to ISO 100, it's a 1 minute exposure at f8. Pretty simple rule. Now, if it's 4 seconds, well, then I got a 4 minute exposure at ISO 100. And this is how we can really rough out our composition, see the amount of light that's falling on the scene, gauge the ambient light, and then after that, once we've nailed our ambient exposure and we go back to our ISO 100 and we're shooting for a minute, now we can add in the flashlight. All right? And then once again, we'll check our exposure. We're going to, our ambient exposure will be correct because we've already kind of nailed that. So at this point, what are we really looking at? How bright our flashlight is, how good a job we're doing painting, and then we adjust once again. If there's not enough light, we add more time or we get closer to the subject. All right? So do you see how we're kind of dividing this up in between ambient light and flash? All right? Or flashlight, rather. So here's a case, once again, in Rhyolite, which you'd see if you go on the Death Valley workshop with Lance. And who's teaching that with Lance? Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, Chris? Great little place. So many cool options up here. This was just the ambient light, and it worked out to be 3.5 minutes at f8. And then I just went in and added a little bit of light. And practiced over and over again until I got the light, the way I wanted it. All right. Now, you heard Lance say that what you don't want to do is paint from right behind the camera. You always want to paint at some sort of angle. And that is by far the most important thing that you could learn from this talk right here. And when we say don't paint from behind the camera, I don't mean step 2 feet to the right and paint from over here. We want to be at a really hard side angle. So if you are all the camera and you're light painting, you wouldn't hit this wall from that angle, but literally the flashlight would be here at the side. It's that heavy duty side angle light, right? So look at the difference here in the way the texture is revealed, the shape of the statue. In this case, what I did was I've got my ambient exposure, right? And I can't recall what that was at this point. It was probably pretty quick, maybe about 30 seconds or something. But I got my ambient exposure for the Capitol building, and then I painted the horseman from the camera. Pretty boring. Look at the difference in how the texture and the shape is brought out when you go clearly to the side, right? And here's another really super obvious example. Straight light right from the back of the camera onto the soldiers. It's very boring. This is not exciting. This does not thrill us. But when you go from the side, it starts to add more drama. And once again, the shape is revealed. The shadows are revealed. All right? So painting from the side, and really, really from the side, people. That's the most important thing that we can do to make light painting interesting. All right? Now, different distances are also going to control both the exposure and the shape of the light. So here's a little piece of art that was on a fence, and I painted it from the side. As you can see here, we've got the, let's see, it's not coming up. You can see the shadows on one side, and you can see that I lit it from this side. But look what happens when you get closer with the flashlight, which ultimately is going to make your beam smaller. You can also do that with zooming flashlights like the Coast. But if you get closer or zoom in, notice how you start to get a fall off in the light source. So you can see where it is most illuminated right in here, and it falls off. That's one of the features of a flash that we can really work with. I like to describe it as little pools of light, right? If you go into a nice restaurant that's good ambiance, you'll notice that each little table's got its own little pool of light. You go into a cafeteria, what do you have? Just one big light, everything's illuminated, right? And you can see that same sort of technique used here. In some places, I'm significantly closer, and some places I'm further away. So painting the steps in the foreground, I'm quite a bit further away with a broad light. And then literally, to paint the door and up in the ceiling, I'm hiding behind the columns there. So now my flashlight is significantly closer to the subject. Again, little areas of brightness, little areas of darkness. Same thing here. You can see that the side of the truck is a little bit less illuminated than the front of the truck. And in this case, I used a blue gel, and we can see this was, it's probably about a 3-minute exposure or so, judging by the star trails. But then I walked up very, very closely and just kind of popped the flashlight into the headlights to make them appear as if they were on. And paint from lots of different angles. The more angles you paint from, the more realistic it's going to be. Now look at this. This picture is going to shock you because it's got nothing to do with light painting. But this is a typical classic sort of portrait, right? Let's look at how that portrait was created. It was made by one key light, very close to the subject, in this case a softbox, and then what we call a fill light, which is a little further or less powerful. So if you painted one side exactly 10 seconds and painted the other side exactly 10 seconds, that's going to cause a certain look. But if you do one 20 seconds and 110, then the 20 seconds is going to be your key light, and the 10 seconds is going to be a fill light. And in this way, you can get a real sort of, what did you use, Matt? Cinematic? Is that the word you used, I think? Filmic?
Theatrical.
Theatrical. So think about painting different amounts of time in different positions. So here in this one, I was off camera left here, and the bulk of my time was spent painting the front, and then of course the top front. But then I walked around to this side over here, and there's a lot less light. I mean, this is a completely dark scene, so there's no light on this truck at all except for what I'm adding in. But it's a lot dimmer on this side. And that, once again, gives dimension. That presence of shadow will give us dimension, and it gives depth to a scene, right? Same thing in this case. We're, once again, this is in Zion National Park. This is a Grafton ghost town, and this is a completely dark building. And so what we did here is we set up a light painting demo for our students, and I went around and lighted. And I painted the roof and a little bit of the front from a pretty good distance, maybe 40 feet away, with a 65 lumen flashlight, which is pretty weak, by the way. And then next what I did was I walked up onto the porch, and then I stood in front of a window and hid the front of the flashlight so the camera is in front of me, couldn't see the front of the flashlight. And once again, keeping that flashlight at one angle, I was painting like this to create the shadows, from the little spindles there in the railings. And then we had, I'm not sure if it was Gabriel or one of the students, went around to each side of the house and popped the flash in. Now the flash is so much stronger and brighter and instantaneous than a flashlight. So it looked as if the whole house was illuminated. All right, so lots of different angles. In this image, there's at least 4 different angles. I was very low on the right-hand side. Again, my flashlight about 6 inches from the concrete, and that produces that texture. As you can well imagine, if I was painting it straight down, it would just sort of flatten out. We wouldn't see that nice texture in the concrete. So I did that, and then I walked to the left and then painted this highlight along the edge. Of course, that once again gives depth and dimension. And then another round of painting was on the back triangle up there, and that was the brightest part because that's where I wanted y'all to look. All right. And then lastly, one more memorial here, and you can see the different angles that I was painting. So in this case, I painted from the side, and you could see this illumination here, and then I went to the other side and painted that, and then did the same thing for the other thing, and then jumped up inside of here, and once again, painted certain little areas of brightness. The flashlight being closer is now significantly brighter, and when the flashlight's further away, it's quite a bit dimmer. So, how do we do this? Well, first of all, you've got to keep your body in between the camera and your flashlight. So the moment the camera sees the light, then you get this. This was one of my first attempts at light painting a long time ago. And I thought, ooh, it would be so cool to light paint this little trail coming back towards the camera. I didn't think anything of it. I'm just walking along the trail. And of course, every little wiggle, of course, is my flashlight wiggling. So yeah, so you gotta hide the flashlight. So if you're the camera, I'm painting everything with my flashlight behind me like this, so you all can't see the flashlight. And now I can paint whatever I want. But the moment that flashlight gets introduced into the scene and you can see the front of it, then you've got some problems. You've got some unexpected surprises. So another attempt, keeping the flashlight hidden from the camera. All right. Think about color gels. Our flashlights come in different colors. We'll talk about that briefly in a moment. But in this case, wanted the idea that the car was getting ready to leave the garage. So I put a red gel over the flashlight and I painted the whole rear of the garage. And then I took the gel off the flashlight and then painted both sides of the car. So you can see, once again, if you look at the highlights, you can always tell where it's been painted from. So it was painted from that side, and then of course from the other side. Once again, I did the headlights and painted a little bit from the grille. And then I went further out, maybe 15 feet out, and lowered my camera once again very close to the ground, 6 inches, and painted the ground again to pull up that texture. All right. Or in this case, using a blue gel on the inside and then yellow on the outside. And a lot of this light is, very natural. I think sodium vapors from a street light. And again, this is in Death Valley up at Rhyolite. So that color, that contrasting color can really make things exciting, the warm, cool. But it can also really change the mood of a photograph, for sure. So you want to, of course you want to experiment, but as you're looking at your images, you want to start to develop an idea. Where are you going? If you're going to start off with an initial idea, but you can change, mid-stride as things start to develop and you're creating new things and you just sort of go with it. So in this case, in the Zion National Park workshop, full moonlight, and again, this is probably about a 3-minute exposure looking to the south. You can see the very long star trails going across the sky, so that lets you know you're looking to the south. And in this case, I took a xenon flashlight, which is kind of a warm bulb. It's an incandescent flashlight. And I ever so lightly painted the front of the fence, of course, once again from the side. Then the highlight that you're seeing on the left side of the building is the moon. That's the full moonlight. So there's just a hint of light on the front of the building. And then I went inside and hit on the inside of the house and then illuminated the whole inside of the building. So overall, this has kind of got a warmer sort of feeling, right? You might walk by here and think, oh, sure, I'm gonna go in there and get a cup of hot cocoa, But take the same building, or a different building, but the same town, same night, and add a different color to it, and you're thinking, I don't know if I want to go in for a hot cup of cocoa there. This is kind of frightening, So for this one, I put my white balance on my camera. I made it a little bit more blue than I typically would, and then I used a blue gel and painted this time more successfully walking towards the camera, so the walkway is sort of entering you in, the blue walking in, and once again hid the flashlight from the camera. Then I painted the outside of the building, and then I stood for probably about a minute in the doorway and just illuminated the whole of the inside. Okay, but very different moods just because of the color. All right. Death Valley, this was the standard color of my flashlight. And I just didn't like it. It just didn't feel quite right. I wanted a little bit more orangey red. So what I did was I just put on the appropriate gel, and that color combination felt better to me. That yellow just felt a little off. And you can also narrow the beam. Several of my cohorts talked about different ways with either a grid or a snoot. I've even used like paper towel holders that I've gaffed Gaff. That's a new verb now. I like that. You know, I put gaffer's tape on the inside and outside so it's black because we don't want that light spilling out so the camera can see it. And you know, you can kind of push it forward and push it back over the head of the flashlight to help you narrow the beam a little bit and hide it from the camera. Or again, using something like a focusing flashlight from Coast, you can very much narrow the beam. So here, what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight the writing on the barrels, and you can see this is the ambient light shot. So once again, I set my ambient exposure for this, and now I'm going to add in some flashlight, but I don't want to just broadly paint the whole thing. So what I did was using the button on the back of the flash. You can turn it on and turn it off rather than screw it on and just have it on the whole time. And literally, I just went up and hit each little barrel so that it was, again, those little pools of light. Here in this case, we're in the Neon Museum in Vegas, Gabriel and myself, and this is, again, several different distances. So when I'm painting in closer, in the letters R and H, I'm significantly closer with my flashlight, and then I back up a little bit to paint the orange. Okay? Now, when we're thinking about flashlights, there's a couple different ways to think about them. The brightness, which is measured in lumens, and then the color, which is typically going to depend whether it's a LED or xenon or incandescent. So a warm light would be an incandescent. And one of the ones I use is a Surefire G2 at 65 lumens, which is, when you turn it on, you think, gosh, this isn't really all that bright. But as you heard some other folks mention, sometimes you need a dimmer light source. So this is a good old standby. You can also get the Coast HP5, and that goes from 19 to 185 lumens. So you can use it in low mode or high mode. That's got an LED bulb, so it's going to be a little bit cooler or more white rather than yellow. So if you want to add some color into that, you can use some gels to put over top of that. Or you can get very powerful ones like this one that's 320 lumen. I think you heard Gabriel say that you can paint very distant cliff sides, things like that with a powerful 320 lumen. So I usually stick around the 60 or the 300, and that gives me a dimmer one and a brighter one that I can work with. And gels come in, you can get all kinds of gels for all different sorts of purposes. And but the thing is that it's really nice to be able to control the color of the light, I think, as you guys have seen. So some manufacturers will have little plastic or rubber things that will adhere over to the front of your lens, and you can put a filter in that. That's very handy. Before I started using those sorts of things, I would just grab these filters and crush them over the front of the lens and hold the flashlight. Very inelegant, but it works. So all kinds of different approaches to using gels. All right, now, a couple hints and tips, you guys. Wear dark clothing, go ninja. Right? Go ninja. When we were painting that bus, you may remember one of our students had khaki pants on. And no matter how we worked it, because the light he was shining on the bus was bouncing back against his clothing, it showed up in all the photographs. So, not saying you have to go completely ninja, but stay away from white pants and a white coat and wear something dark, right? Again, don't keep your body in between what you're painting and the camera, because you're going to be tempted to hide, and rightfully so, your flashlight so the camera can't see it. But now if you're painting right here, the flashlight can't see that either. So you've got to paint this way with the flashlight behind you so the camera can see what you're illuminating. Does that make sense, y'all? See what I'm saying? So you don't want to put yourself in front of what you are actually painting. And then lastly, have fun, experiment. Really, so many people, they're just afraid to get started. And the first time you turn on your camera, set it to ISO 200, f8, just go out and paint. Count to yourself, 1001, 1002, 1003, and then shut the flashlight off. You'll know immediately when you go back to your camera whether you need to add more or less light in, and you just go from there. So that's it. A brief little look at light painting.
I thought that after you got all these great tidbits from all the other amazing people in our cohort here, my peers, I'm blushing to be amongst them. I thought it'd be great to say, if you were so enthusiastic that you are taking workshops now, how can I give you ways to prepare for them, right? So nobody ever gave me advice, and I took many workshops, and then I started teaching with Gabe about 7 years ago now. And you learn your way up to it, right? But you can also learn your way up to being the best student possible. So I'm trying to give you a little bit. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, so I thought it'd be useful. The most important thing that I think you should ask yourself prior to attending a learning experience is, what is your story? Not a common question, right? What is your story? And I'm going to start by telling you a quick one. This photograph was the birth of night photography for me. I was 18. I grew up in Flemington, New Jersey. This is in the cemetery overlooking my town. And I had just gotten into photography. I was like, yeah, I love this stuff. I got a Tamron, like 28 to 70 lens. I got a fisheye adapter, and I borrowed my mom's tripod. I got like this cable release thing, and I bought myself a Vivitar flash. I'm like, let's go experiment, Brian. He goes, all right, let's go. Where are we gonna hang out? Graveyard. Of course, we're teenagers, right? So up on top of the hill, I set up the camera. I put it. I'm like, this is gonna be a good exposure, you know, like this. Stand in front of the camera. He goes, okay. I open the shutter. I walk over here. And boom, I fire the flash, and he walks out of the frame. I'm like, why'd you walk out of the frame? He says, picture's over. I'm like, no, this is still open. He's like, cameras can do that? I'm like, I'm experimenting. Yes, camera shutters can stay open longer. Okay, that's fine. Fast forward, I go to the dark room, I'm processing, and I go, what is this? I can see. He's a ghost. I can see through him. This is, and then my brain just went boom, 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 and I'm like, I have ideas. I know what I can do with this. I don't know everything, but I want to do more of this. That's when my passion for night photography was born, and I've been doing it for over 20 years because of that moment. So what's your story? Where did you find passion for making images? Ask yourself that. Bring that feeling with you to the workshop. Put it someplace special and hold it. When you know that why, set some goals. You should write these down for yourself. You should say things like this. I want to make my first star trail stack. Maybe you've never done that before. I want to get more comfortable with light painting. Take one of Tim's courses. I want to learn how to make my images look great during post-processing. You have particular goals. And you need to give yourself goals that you can achieve, right? Don't make them like, I want to bring peace to the world. Not possible during a workshop, right? With photography, could do that. It's trying, right? But let's make them achievable. Next, asking more questions, ask your instructors. Anybody you take a workshop from, before the workshop, send them questions. Start letting them know what you're interested in. Let them know what your level is. And the act of forming questions for somebody else will help you clarify what you want to learn. They go hand in hand. They help each other. Here's some examples. Can you help me understand? Fill in the blank. How do I get the most out of my workshop experience? You know, get you both thinking about it. And what questions am I not asking that I should be asking? These are just ideas. There's hundreds of possibilities here. Start a dialogue with your instructors. This sounds really pedantic, but please come ready to take lots of notes, because writing while you're listening more than doubles your retention. This is really good. You can't just listen and get as much as writing stuff down at the same time. And yeah, I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that one. Chris had an amazing demonstration on scouting. I learned from him during that, and I can't wait to take the things that I learned from him during this and do better things with it. I was thinking that I like to spend times with the park map just for the basic things. As a workshop attendee, learn the names of the areas so you know what you're looking at. Just a basic thing, right? Get familiar with those features and stuff, and then go back to that, when this gets on YouTube, go back to Chris's presentation and learn, learn more there. And definitely check out your instructors' websites, because you're going to learn a lot about what they like to shoot. They only show their best work, theoretically, on their websites, right? So you're going to learn more about their tastes. Then you'll be able to draw more ideas from what you think you can extract from them, because they're there to give to you. So this is a two-way exchange. The more information you give your instructor, the more they can give you. And then if you find some images you really like, make notes. Tell them about it. And you say, these are things, or these are characteristics that I would like to bring out in my photography, or I have an idea, how can I do this thing? And it kind of started with this idea, right? And please be open to making friends. Workshops are not a solitary experience. Workshops are where people come together to improve, right? So come and just have an attitude of openness, right? Because you're all going to help each other. As the instructors are there to help you, your peers will also lift you up. It's a beautiful thing. So camaraderie is one thing that I've found when I'm a learner that amplifies my experience. So keep that in mind. And be open to seeing styles differently. Break out of the rut. You've done things a certain way. You're not going to a workshop. You could just make a vacation if you wanted to go someplace to take the same pictures you always take. Get dangerous. Experiment. Go to a workshop to grow and take risks. So they're going to expose you to other ways of seeing. You should be open. Take the filters off your eyes and see what other people are doing. And start to just say, all right, what else is possible? What am I afraid of doing? Oh, I should try that. Seek constructive critique. Don't wait for somebody to tell you. Bring your work forward and say, do you have other thoughts about this, right? I love that. This is a management tool, actually. The compliment sandwich. Anybody know what a compliment sandwich is?
I've never had one.
You've been given one, though. First, you say something that you like about somebody's work. Then you provide constructive criticism, and then you say another thing that you like. It's a very wonderful way to honor their work, but also provide an opportunity for them to grow too, right? And that constructive part could be offered as a question instead of oh, you should do this instead of that. And say, well, what would happen if you did this? This is ways that you can help each other grow. And this thing I love, dance with fear. If you're afraid, if you get little butterflies about a technique or something, you're in the right place. Play with the butterflies when you're at a workshop. That's where you grow the most. Boom, blow that up. This is a popular term in startups, fail forward. What this means is you are not going to be successful. You've seen that in a lot of our presentations. It takes work, it takes practice, it takes experimentation. You're not going to be successful with every frame, but every frame takes you forward. Examine what you didn't like, do it better, move forward, fail forward, because that's where you find success. My dad, when he was teaching me to ski when I was 4, I never forgot this. He said, if you don't fall, you're not trying hard enough. I thank him for that. It's just a beautiful thing he gave me. And then every inspirational coach ever says we learn more from the mistakes than from successes, right? So let's bring that with it and make it personal. I think a good workshop is an experience. It's not just a class, right? You're not just doing something mechanical. There's everything. When you go to a workshop, the whole thing becomes a bundle and it becomes a set of memories, right? You're not just coming to get a test and at the end somebody's going to say, yes, you got the right answers. No, that you're bringing home memories plus achievements plus the opportunity to grow. And I'm not bragging. I did some math, and between us, we have, and I'm underestimating here, over 50 years of teaching experience. We're not just artists and creators. We have put effort into understanding how to teach, which is in itself another craft altogether. So, and that leads me to why national parks at night. Yes, I actually wanted to talk to you about why national parks at night. Like the story I told you in the beginning about why I love night photography, this is why I love the idea of national parks at night. This photograph and this photograph, happened after I went to a trade show. Boring. Got out of the trade show, hopped in the car with my best friend, drove up to Arches. I'd never been there before. And I had the wrong equipment. I had the wrong foul weather gear. It was January 21st, I believe. In Moab, it's a little warm on January 21st. And you know, Moab is somewhere around 8,000 feet, 6,000, you know, it's up there. It's cold. Not only is it cold, there's less air. So I said I want to see Delicate Arch. I'd seen photographs of it. I didn't listen to Chris because I didn't know him yet. I didn't scout. But I said I want to go up there, and I pointed, and it was this, you know, like. So I walked up there in trade show shoes, and there was hard-packed snow and some ice. And at the end, to get to Delicate Arch, like you come around the side, and then, I know as a workshop instructor, I shouldn't be telling the story, but you come around the side, and there's like ice, and it's leaning away, and I'm like holding onto the rock, and I'm like, this better be worth it. And I come around the side, and I see this. I'm like, we are in the right place at the right time. Full moon. And it's just boom, blasting across, hitting the snow and reflecting back at me. The air is crisp. The stars are sparkling at me and saying, get that camera out already. And it was during that moment where I said, I want to share this opportunity with other people. I think other people should have the opportunity to see that there's beautiful things that are protected that we can go out and make beautiful night photography with. I get to smash two things I love together with, teaching and beautiful night photography. So I went out and I shot some more that night, and every photograph we have, we know there's stories, right? And this is the part where I get to show, instead of words, photographs. And each of these things, each of these times I've gone out to parks, I can remember those stories and the people I was with. And I can remember the experiments that I did, right? And the group light painting, because this is 2 or 3 people working on this. And especially, this is one of Lance's photographs. Everybody shooting together is a beautiful thing. And we all come together and we say, all right, how can we become better together? And we end up at the end of the workshop saying, let's do this group shot like we did here. And I hope that you take these ideas that I gave you to every workshop that you attend. This is my gift to you. I hope that it inspires you and lifts you up. Please share these things with other people. The ideas are free. But next, I just want to say gratitude. Gratitude to you for coming here to listen to us, talk about things we love all day. You are wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a round of applause.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.